Sword of Coming Chapter 8:18. Lian Xing River, green peaks are like clusters, and the fairy houses on the tops of Xingyang Mountain in the distance seem to have old sword immortals calling for friends and friends. They are holding private gatherings, candles everywhere, reflecting like a city of fire. The stars in the sky shift and the wine glasses on earth turn, pleasing to the eye. 3 watch lights and 5 watch chickens are when they are studying and practicing sword. At the Xianxia inn nearest to Qinggu Peak, Qin Pingon and Lu Xianyang are lying in the wicker chairs to enjoy the cool air. Lu Xianyang has already been slumbering while Qin Pingon has nothing to do. Qin Pingon closed the book and put in his sleeve. He whispered softly, "It's time for the sun." According to Taoism, there is the mysterious saying, when the sun is a sunfire 216. The cultivator chooses this time to practice, tempers the body and fumigates. Jin Dan, full of yin and pure yang with a beautiful appearance. According to the white-haired boy, one of the 10 young candidates, Wang Liyuan the rice thief, was originally an unknown Taoist document, but he accidentally picked up an abandoned Taoist book. Follow this method to practice harmony in the mountains and rivers, and raise thousands of profound beads. When you gain the Tao, there is an opportunity for the fog to clear the sun. Yuming's weather. This wording is naturally a memory that Wu Shuangjiang gave to Daolu in the night ship. It can make Wu Shuangjiang, who is good at soldering all things and turning them into his own use, evaluate so high than this Wang Liyun. It is not surprising. Will definitely be a hero in the future Qingming world, provided that Bai Yujing's second head teacher should not be targeted. Now in 100 years, it happens to be the second Daoist who is in charge of Bai Yujing and is responsible for monitoring the world. Qin Pingon guessed that Wang Liyuan might have quietly rushed to Wuxia. The world, wait until the gate reopens, wait until Lu Qin abbot Bai Yujing's affairs and then return to Qingming world. Lu Xianyang opened his eyes, rubbed his face, yawned, changed a comfortable posture, curled up with his hands in his sleeves, couldn't help complaining. The gifted time? Wouldn't it have to wait more than 10 hours? I'm here later, I'm not at home here. Miss Yu has to live alone in a shop by the river. She is timid. What if she knocks on the door by the water ghost in the middle of the night? Qin Pingon put his hands on his abdomen, looked at the galaxy hanging on the sky and smiled, crying, "You is not a little brave." Lu Xianyang smiled and said, "Ms. Yu and I are a perfect match." Qin Pingon nodded, stood up and walked to the railing to overlook the ferry. Even in the middle of the night, there are still Xinjia ferry boats on the side of Egret Ferry. During the ups and downs, there were female cultivators from the flower shop of Manuel Peak who brought flowers to catch the flowers. The flowers in the baskets did not come from the hills of the vassals, or they were the famous Taoist temples of the dynasty under the mountain, and many bought from other hills. All the melons and fruits from Xinjia must take the Xinjia ferry. In the early days, Xingyang Mountain did not have any flower and wood workshops, but in the past 2 decades, there have been many happy events and too many celebrations. At the suggestion of Zufeng's female ancestor Tianwan, it was temporarily set up. Most of them selected some ordinary but young and beautiful people. Outer sisters, beautifully called the picking officer. The basket girl Lu Xianyang still lay on the wicker chair, unwilling to move, and said lazily, "When things are coming, you should think about everything you should or shouldn't. Then don't think too much. Ask the sword about a big deal. Can't beat it and run." The peaks of Xingyang Mountain, don't they all like to open the mirror? Lu Xianyang has watched them never lose a game but never spend any money. Qin Pingon leaned on the railing and said with a smile, "If you run a fart, there is no reason to fail." Lu Xianyang said, "This is not like Qin Pingon." When the night was cool and there was no heat, Lu Xianyang was silent for a moment and asked, "Can't sleep?" Qin Pingon nodded, "Get used to it." Lu Xianyang said, "Sleep your mind first, then sleep your eyes so that you can truly rest your mind with sleep, something that the lower 5 realms of Qi practitioners know. You read so many books on Buddhism and Taoism, don't you understand this?" Qin Pingon said helplessly, "Knowing and accomplishing are 2 different things." Lu Xianyang rolled his eyes and said, "Then it will be the same as it was back then. He will always be quick and slow and he will not have the slightest comprehension. I cannot blame old man Yao for not accepting you as an apprentice." Qin Pingon smiled and did not refute what Lu Xianyang said was the truth. But if the sword repairman of the summer palace or the drunkard and gambler who has personally learned the second shopkeeper and a basket of flying swords might be able to stare out a pair of eyes, there is such a person in the world who talks to the hermit? Qin Pingon suddenly said, Wei Yueshan finally took people up the mountain. Most of them are not convinced by the inn's eyesight, so I have to personally screen the guest's genealogy. Lu Xianying questioned, Who? Qin Pingon said slowly, Wei Yueshan, 280 years old, was born in a scholarly family in Huaxiang County of the old Baishuang dynasty. His career path was not smooth and his cultivation qualifications were good. Bone, cultivating Taoism in the mountain for 230 years, currently serving as the steward of Bailudu, a monk in the Dragon Gate realm, not a sword repairer. If he enters the mountain as a young man, he has a chance to be among the Golden Core. He is the highest moon character of Qinggu Peak today, and also a Golden Core sword repairer. Zhi Yan's second disciple, Zhi Yan, was the former ancestor of the peak of Qinggu Peak. After her soldiers were disbanded from the world, the door was not green and yellow. Zhi Yan's eldest disciple, Wei Qi, couldn't get through the general affairs and couldn't break the bottleneck of the Dragon Gate. He lost his heart and broke into a misfortune outside the mountain. He shot and killed a sword repairman from another sect, and provoked the Zhou Ying dynasty, who was in full swing at the time. Zhang Lv Yanchu personally took action. He said he was detained in Feng prison. The door was cleared secretly. At that time, Zhou Ying's sword repairman from the royal family should be there, watching Yanchu kill this person with his own eyes. And Xinjiang Mountain does not depend on it. Gui Yunlu, shopkeeper Niuerong Guanhai, like Wei Yueshan, is not a sword repairman. Because of her good looks, she is secretly attached to the ancestor Tao Yanbao, but this matter is hidden, so she is a shameless concubine, the ancestor of Xinjiang Mountain. Not all monks knew it. When Zhi Yan died, every time the ancestors of the first-line peak discussed the matter, the sword fairy embryos were divided up. King Yufeng couldn't even get the leftovers. Of course, no one would like to go to King Yufeng to sit on a cold bench, but the mountain owner in his early years, Emperor Zhu, had a good relationship with Zhi Yan. When he was young, both parties almost became Taoist. Therefore, both public and private were willing to take care of them. Every 30 to 50 years, Emperor Bamboo would move out of the mountain gate and give it to King Yufeng. 1 or 2 sword fairy embryos. It's a pity that Qinggu Peak can't keep the people. At least 10 to 20 years, those sword repairs will shift the peak head, and the old sword celestials will have eyebrows, and then change the Patriarch's Hall and leave Qing Fog, switch to other peaks. No wonder those young swordsmen choose this way. After all, King Yufeng doesn't even have a decent swordsman elder. After going there to practice, except for a few dead swords, he can't get any living swordsmanship, so Qing Wufeng has not had a golden core sword repaired for more than 200 years. According to Xinjiang Mountains, according to the rules of the Patriarch Hall, if there is not a single golden core for 300 years, and the entire old Qinggu sword repairs 1 vein, the entire mountain must be surrendered. 60 years ago, Niuerong, who was once Tao Yanbao's grandson Tao Zi's father, slapped her a dozen times in the Crossing Cloud building. So once Qinggu Peak changes the peak owner, Niuerong doesn't want to go to Qiulingfeng to practice, she has to find another way out, such as the Zhuyu Peak, which was laughed at by Xinjiang Mountain's young and old swordsmen, as the bird does not stand. Xiefeng with only a pair of masters and servants is actually pretty good. Wei Yueshan is relatively good at being a human being, can earn money, he can be mixed everywhere. The peaks of Xinjiang Mountain are actually willing to accept this wealthy egret to take care of his duties. In recent years, he and the customs are the old swordsmen of the upper 5 realms. Xia Yuntai often walked around. Wei Yueshan sent out 2 pieces just from the small arsenal on the mountain, and almost all of his family was gone. Therefore, the Emperor Zhu had a lot of opinions on this person, and he had not been among the 5 realms before. I will endure Wei Yueshan's snobbery. At the moment, the Emperor Bamboo must have made up his mind to let Wei Yueshan hand over the fat of the Egret Crossing, and take over the Egret Crossing in the future. There are several candidates in the heart of the Emperor Bamboo, one of whom is an alternate. My old friend is Lu Jingchun, who was in Zuqiangzifeng a few years ago. From Fulu Street to Qingfeng City to Xinjiang Mountain, go around turns around, the world is so small, it seems that I can always meet acquaintances. As for the disputes between Wei Yueshan and Niuerong, those smoky grievances and hatreds, I won't say much anyway, these two are not important figures. Lu Xianying's head hurt when he heard this series of inside stories. Lu Xianying really didn't bother to remember some of these things. Qin Pingon was enough to be the accountant. He was born as a treasurer and master, so he just joked, "Why don't you be a storyteller?" Qin Pingon turned around and smiled. You think you can make money as a storyteller? Nothing. I haven't worked in the Great Wall of Jianqi. As a result, it is difficult to cheat a few coins from the child. Lu Xianying sat up and said, You have remembered so many messy things. Why do you want to help Xingyang Mountain to repair the family tree? Qin Pingon rubbed his chin. If the first-line peak is willing to spend money and pay a high price, I really have no objection. Lu Xianying lay back in the wicker chair and said, They are here. Qin Pingon smiled and walked into the house to open the door to welcome the guests. Because the sword of the Yellow River at Bailudu, a sword light divided into 19 points, and at the same time the sword fell on the peaks. Although the thunder is heavy and the rain is small, the sword light will be scattered to all the local sword immortals and congratulating guests in the mountains. As a result, it still made the heartstrings tense inside and outside Xingyang Mountain, for fear that there was a mistake in which link, especially the egret crossing the steward Wei Yueshan. After finally checking the complicated files on the ferry, I felt that there was nothing missing. I rushed to the chaotic cloud tower and asked Guiyun Tower to carefully inspect again, check all the guest guides in Guanyu. When Wei Yueshan was climbing, he directly brought a number of direct disciples, and asked his junior sister Ni Yuerong to leave in person. On the way, Wei Yueshan scolded the 18th generation of the ancestors of the Yellow River, and was anxious to reincarnate. Why didn't you go directly to the frontline peak ancestors hall to make trouble? And what kind of sword fairy spirit was the sword at the ferry? Ni Yuerong did not think that the senior was making a fuss. In fact, before Wei Yueshan climbed the mountain, she had already led people to go through the inn records, and asked a few eager brothers and children Xiu to check their identities one by one, but there were still a dozen guests. Not from the top of the mountains or similar to the distinguished guests who can afford to live in a house. The inn did not dare to disturb. When Wei Yueshan heard about this, she cursed on the spot that she had long hair and short-sightedness, and refused to give her a little face, insisting pull her up and knock on the door together, carefully check the identity. Ni Yuerong was annoyed in her heart. It's not your place. Of course you can toss about it casually, not caring about the face of those high-profile genealogists, but how will I do business with Yunlu? Ni Yuerong knocked on the door, and Wei Yueshan saw a young Daoist with a slender figure, wearing a lotus crown, and wearing a green gauze robe full of clouds and moisture. He had the strong Taoism of the high school immortal family on the mountain and the wealthy family. Graceful demeanor. In fact, when I saw this person, Wei Yueshan regretted it, especially the lotus crown that symbolized the Dao lineage system. I saw Wei Yueshan, a monk in the Dragon Gate realm, trembled in his heart and coughed, reminding the younger sister for you. Ni Yuerong smiled and said softly, Master Chao, the inn has just received an order from the ancestor hall. We need to re-examine the identity of each guest. I'm really sorry. She saw the young Taoist frown slightly, then smiled and finally said with a gentle smile, My Xianxia pass, isn't it still detained at your inn in accordance with the rules of the mountain? Take the sect of Xingyang Mountain. Background: this thing is true and false, should it's not hard to tell. Why, it's still not enough, I need to report the landscape genealogy of the master. Although I don't go down the mountain very often, I also know that this is a bit of a bad rule. Xianxia's move, is it a bit of a suspicion of bullying? Look, listen, Wei Yueshan, who is the most able to observe the words and expressions of the fairy that is greeted and sent off, feels that the foreign Taoist surname Chao in front of him, if he is not a serious Daoist genealogy, he can seal that. Guandi 8. Wei Yueshan has seen a lot of masters who wander around and visit the immortals. The young Taoist in front of him only said that the spirit of the golden branches and leaves and the fairy wind road bones can definitely rank in the top 10. Ni Yuerong looked resentful, bit her lip and whispered, Master Chao, here at our inn, I really dare not violate the patriarch hall. I beg Master Chao to be considerate. Yuerong is grateful. After this incident, I will definitely come to the door to toast with Master Chao. Crime. But Chaomo just smiled and said nothing. Ni Yuerong retreated somewhat. The brothers and sisters of them, leaning on the tower near the water of Qinggu Peak, and the incense sentiment saved by their teacher Ji Yan, each had this errand. Neither of them was a sword repairer. If it were the golden sword repairer, Inju just lie on the peak and enjoy the blessing. Where is it necessary you have to deal with trivial matters every day, not to mention delay in practice but also to make a smile with others. In Xingyang Mountain, it is possible that a chi trainer in the Dragon Gate realm is not as good as a sword cultivator in the Dongfu realm. He speaks and does things stiffly, especially after the battle, Young sword skillers usually follow their masters and ancestors down the mountain. Although most of them I have never been to such tragic battlefields as Old Dragon City and Dadu, both sides of the strait, Xingyang Mountain selected for them to experience the place under the mountain, which is very particular. Just play a game and also play a sword, but it is destined to have no life worry. After returning to the mountain, everyone's eyes became higher than the top. In fact, the ones who really tie their heads to their trouser belts are the old sword immortals who, like Peak Master Yunfeng, who like to stand up and exit at the front line peak, will each bring a group of direct disciples, willing to give up their lives. In Lao Longqing and Dali accompany this kind of war sword to kill the demon. Last name Chao? Wearing a lotus crown again. Wei Yueshan suddenly remembered something and was shocked and tentatively asked, "Dare to ask Master Chao, but do you practice in the mountains of the old Baishuang dynasty?" On the battlefield of the old Dragon City in the past, there was a Daoist immortal who had the pseudonym Chao Rong, who was born out of the sky with magic spells and a few magical powers, shaking his arms to the world. Qin Pingon shook the sleeves of the robe lightly, squinted and smiled. So what? So what? Not so? Wei Yueshan smiled bitterly and immediately reminded the younger sister. Don't annoy this person, let's end it. Chao Imo is very likely to be related to the fairy Chao Rong, who is rumored to be the ancestor of Bai Yujing's 3 head teachers. And Yuerong immediately asked senior brother in his heart, or let's breathe with the gods and ask about 1 or 2. Now Qizhen, the great heavenly sovereign, and a few high sword talismans passed down from the ancestors, are staying at the first-line peak of Zhoushan Mountain. At that time the Lord Zhuhuang came down to welcome guests. At the gate of the mountain to meet Qi Tianjun and his entourage Gaozhen. As for the fairy of the gods, naturally there is no need to stop at the Bailudu, just go straight to the first line of peaks. Wei Yueshan was about to answer the younger sister, but in the corner of his eyes he saw Chao Imo with a smile as if everything was silent. Wei Yueshan knew in his heart and immediately took his junior sister to leave. For this matter, Feijin sent a letter to the frontline peak to harass God sect Qi Tianjun. It was a big joke. Qizhen is the leader of Immortal Master Ijo, and then the young man on Xingyang Mountain, the little white egret, crosses the Cloud Tower, a Dragon Gate realm, a sea view realm. 2 little monks covered in bronze ask the noble heavenly monarch whether there is a name under the fairy Chao Rongman in the 3 lines of Bai Yujing Taoist priest named Chao Imo. Besides, in the Aquarius Island, except for the unreasonable Yuanying sword fairy like Fengliu and Huanghe, who would come to provoke Xingyang Mountain after eating. Even if you lose your mind and have the courage, do you have the ability? Qin Pingon closed the door, turned and walked back to the viewing platform. Lu Xianying raised his head. I thought I needed to go out myself. It's all people's hearts that have always been like this. Qin Pingon took out the white jade Ganoderma lucidum from his sleeve and patted the palms of his hands lightly, as if he was scrutinizing people's hearts. In fact, it would be a good thing if I was noticed that something was wrong with the Cloud Tower. Doing similar things again, you can be more cautious and strive to keep dripping water. Many regrets as far as its strength can be. Just because I did not expect it, I will regret it afterwards. But this time I live here, I actually did not deliberately want to hide my identity. Before you came, I was the only one to stay here, nothing to do, just treat it as a joke. Lu Xianying asked, why come here a few days in advance? Qin Pingon began to lie down on a wicker chair, closing his eyes and taking a nap. After a moment of silence he replied softly, I was worried that the Shanshui Dibao officially lifted the ban after the Confucian Temple discussion was over. I have entrusted my husband a long time ago to help hide his identity, so a deputy leader gave some hints during the discussions. After not allowing outsiders to leave the Confucian Temple, he would easily talk about the inside story of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and the mountain monks who participated in the discussions of the Confucian Temple. They are all extremely clever people, so I don't know how to reveal my hidden official status, especially my name, but am afraid in case. Once you talk to Xingyang Mountain who asks the sword, it's no longer just nipping Lanchen. Pinyin, it will lose a lot of meaning. Besides, I stayed here early, just sitting here looking at the peaks of Xingyang Mountain from a distance, the sword energy rushing into the sky like the sun. At night, in the evening, the fairy master Yufeng has a lot of stature like a firefly in the summer night, and he can help him cultivate his heart and soul, and he will use it as a warning from time to time on the road in the future. Lu Xianying put his head on the back of his hand, raised Erlang's legs, swayed lightly and smiled. You are born to work, and you are destined to be less comfortable than I am for the rest of your life. Qin Pingon said, I've never been afraid of being busy with hope. The more busy I usually become, the more at ease I am. I'm afraid of things that I can only ask for in case. Since the first time I left home, the reason why I am so busy just to stop being so busy. Lu Xianying gave a hum and asked casually, "Did you see a little slug during the Confucian temple discussion?" Qin Pingon shook his head. "In Panshui County I walked to the door. I originally wanted to see him. After listening to the preaching of Mr. Zheng from Beidasheng, I didn't see him. I just took a walk with Mr. Zheng." Lu Xianying tweeted, "Walking with Zheng Juzhong? It's a beautiful scenery, I envy you." Qin Pingon looked helpless and shook his head. "I am envious, in fact I feel so worried all the way if I don't want to in my life. There is any intersection with Mr. Zheng. Don't you know that during a confrontation between two monks, Mr. Zheng directly killed 2 of the upper 5 who were on Tuyu mountain at the time in front of 2 monks on the top of the world. A monk of the demon race. I now doubt whether Mr. Zheng has also been to the steward of Lizhu Cave, Fulu Street or Taoya Lane nursing yard, shopkeeper buddy, dragon kiln master kiln worker? Man-woman. Will it actually appear next to us early in the morning, have a face-to-face chat? Who knows?" Lu Xianying raised a palm and said with emotion, "You said that there are so many gods and people in such a small place in our hometown." Lu Xianying closed his fists and laughed at himself. "When I was a child I always felt that the sky and the earth outside were big. I went out and took a look. I never figured out the far door and then I returned home, only to find that the palm-sized hometown is actually very strange, as if I have never known it." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Well, my hometown. I forgot who said that he was just a skinny old man. When he grows up you can't remember him, he can't remember you." Lu Xianying said, "Apart from Chao Mo and Qin Haoren, do you have a pseudonym called Forgot Who?" Qin Pingon laughed. Lu Xianying listened to Qin Ping's laughter and smiled. When he was young, the stuffy gourd beside him didn't really like talking, let alone laughs much, but he never slumped his face. It seemed that all the happiness and sadness were careful. For the rest, you can be less happy when you are happy and not so sad when you are sad, just like a house. The main hall, on both sides of the house there are 3 Qin Pingon. When you are happy, the one in the main hall, just go knock Qin Pingon who is unhappy. When you are not happy, go to the happy side to stop by. Such a boy is actually quite pitiful. Therefore in those years Lu Xianying liked to take Qin Pingon around, and then a little slug was around him and the 3 of them walked around their hometown together. The tall boy, the black charcoal boy with a thin bamboo pole, and a follower who blows his nose from time to time, each wearing straw sandals, walking on the country road looking forward to the future together. The knock on the door sounded softly. It was Ni Yuerong who came to apologize with the wine. Qin Pingon ignored it. Ni Yuerong outside the door knocked again and stood there for a while. Seeing that no one opened the door, she silently left, saving a pot of Xianxia wine. Located in the mansion halfway up the mountainside of the Yixian Peak, Tianjun Qizhen and the divine high sword amulet sat opposite each other and were playing. This house with the Chonghuang plaque has always been prepared for Xinjiang mountain celebrations for the most distinguished guests. Gao Jianfu smiled and said, "Neither Fengshui Temple nor Zhenwu Mountain came to congratulate him. Master, be careful that they will be laughed at next time." Qi Tianjun, wearing a fishtail crown, twisted a chess piece and shook his head and said, "After all, the gods are not as good as they are idle clouds and wild cranes. The god sect of Aquarius Island, the Tianjun mansion of Luzhou Xiesher in Beiju, the former Tongye sect of Tonggishao and Yuguazong of Tonggishao are all leaders of the immortal family of Yizhishan." Gao Jinfu asked, "Did the bamboo emperor also break the mirror?" Qi Jin nodded and said, "It hasn't been long since you broke the border. Otherwise you won't be able to see the clues by your primordial infant. Of course, the bamboo emperor's mind is careful, it's not uncommon." Deliberately revealing the meaning of this matter to a discerning person. "After all, I am still reluctant to make all the limelight, and give it to you on the real page was robbed." Gao Jianfu asked heartily. Song Chongjing and Master were both involved in the discussion. Based on the relationship between the Song clan of Dai and Xinjiang Mountain, it is reasonable to say that Qin Pingan's identities should not be concealed. Anyway, it is a secret letter. What can be said clearly in a few words? Why watch going up to Yixianfeng? It seems to be kept in the dark. Qi Jin lightly placed his son on the chessboard and said, "The relationship between Song Chongjing and the Queen Mother of Dai is very delicate. This is like the relationship between Dai capital and the accompanying capital. To put it simply, Song Chongjing was helping the Dali court and the woman to separate the relationship. Based on this, tell Chen Ping'an, the young hermit of the Downfall Mountain, that some grievances on the mountain should be resolved on the mountain, not down the mountain. Gao Jianfu, the Taoist immortal who was known as the Golden Boy and Jade Girl together with He Xiaoyang in the past, has a complicated expression. Qizhen raised his head. Why look forward to the appearance of that hidden official? Gao Jianfu nodded. If Qin Pingan Wenjian succeeds in this, I will convince him and admit that I am inferior to others. From now on I will have no worries and just practice with peace of mind. Qizhen smiled and said, knowing how to find yourself down the stairs, not to go to the tip of the horns, is also regarded as a secret method of spiritual cultivation on the mountain. Gao Jianfu asked, if he really dares to choose this kind of juncture to ask the sword Xingyang Mountain, can he really succeed? Or learn from Fengliu and Yellow River, click until the end and Luopa Mountain will use this to tell a continent. Slowly figure it out. Qizhen said, it is difficult to ask the sword but it is not completely impossible. But once Qin Pings asks the sword he will never be very casual. A young man who can become the last hermit of the Great Wall of Jianqi, neither purely inspiring, nor do something stupid. Jun Jinqing of Zhongyue Mountain stands with Jianqiu Yuanbai in a high-rise corridor facing Xiefeng. Yuanbai smiled bitterly. Jin Shan should not come to Xingyang Mountain this time. It is easy to be accounted for by the Dalisong family. Jin Qing said indifferently, why do I become this mountain monarch? Yuanbai didn't know it? Yuanbai said, it is precisely because he is clear that Yuanbai hopes that Lord Jin Shan can sit in the mountains and rivers of his home country for a long time. Jin Qing glanced at the genius sword repairman who had stopped on the road and said regretfully, as a citizen of Old Zhuing, yours what you have done is worthy of a clear conscience. But in my opinion as a sword repairer, it is a pity that you have fallen here. Xingyang Mountain does things too unnaturally. If I can't come this time, you might even face Xiefeng I can't keep it, just because of the tempers of people like Emperor Zhu Huang and Xia Yunsui. Maybe when the next site is successfully selected, they will follow the boat, saying that they will let you return to your hometown. In fact they will be Shiyun Jianjian. Make the best use of the white things not only to please me but also to attract sword repair embryos in the old Zhuing territory under your banner. As for Yuan Bei's life and death, his reputation in Zheng Yangshen's view is not important at all. Yuan Bei said, the sword repair embryos of the children of the old country as long as they can cultivate early on the mountain, my personal gains and losses are not worth mentioning. The more the sword fairy embryo, the more time is lost, the more disastrous the consequences will be. The later the mountaineering and sword practice, the slower the step. Yuan Bai looked at the snow-covered mountain on the opposite side and said softly, I hope that one day the old Zhu Ying's children can occupy several peaks on Xingyang Mountain, hug each other and not allow outsiders to insult. Jin Qing hesitated. The heartfelt words said, Lu Laoqing found me earlier. He said that it was from the realm sect's upper sect. The Lord Wei Ying intended to make a pen trade with Xingyang Mountain. In exchange Wei Ying wanted to recruit you. Specific exchange conditions, what price will be paid? Lu Laoqing did not elaborate, so I want to hear your opinion. Do you have any ideas about leaving Xingyang Mountain? As long as you nod your head, I will be responsible for discussing the matter with Lu Laoqing and Emperor Bamboo, so you don't have to show up. When Jin Qing said this he was very pleased. It is rare to be regarded as such a great sword fairy like Wei Ying. Wei Ying is a man of great talent and vision. Wei Ying, Wei Jin and Bai Chong are now the leaders of Sanzhou Jianxiu, and all three of them are very likely to make further progress and one day ascend to the ascent. As a great mountain monarch on a continent, Jin Qing is good at the art of looking at qi and he still has this vision. Yuan Bai was stunned and then there was some smile in his eyes and he couldn't help but said, Jin Shan Jun is digging the foot of the wall this time? With arms around his chest, Jin Qing sneered and said, otherwise congratulate Xingyang Mountain? I didn't even bring any gifts. I came empty-handed. The god of wealth Tao Yanba, Tao Zi, the old ape in white, the couple of the Su family in Qingfengqing and the son Su Binxian. 6 people gathered in Qiuling Mountain where Tao Jia's ancestors were located. Qiuling Mountain is the treasure of Feng Shui, second only to the first-line peaks among the peaks of Xingyang Mountain. It is even more suitable for Taoism and sword practice than Shimo Peak in Xiaiyue. Tao Zi has grown into a slim woman. Su Binxian also looks like a suave family member. In his early years, There was a Taoist lady who wandered to Qingfeng City and personally gave a name to the infant Zhou Xian. The implication is very good, both civil and military. Two people of the same age stand together, a couple of gods and goddesses, and they are indeed a perfect match, and the two are indeed about to become a couple on the mountain. Tao Zi and Zhou Xian are both in the Dragon Gate realm. Not to mention the century-old golden pill, the Jiazi golden pill is promising. And it's only 3 now. The two who were in their early 10 years were both sword repairers. The white-clothed old ape had a blunt tone and asked straightforwardly, "Is it the matter of the theft of the fox country?" What a big joke, a huge fox country disappeared out of thin air. But after all these years, Qingfeng City still couldn't even figure out who was behind the scenes. In the future, the Su family will propose marriage with Xinjiang Mountain. What kind of decent beauties can King Fengqing offer? Could it be that Su clan waited for the dowry on Xinjiang Mountain? The old patriarch Tao Yanba was holding the lid of the cup and gently fiddled with the mist of tea. This Yuan Jixiang, who had always spoken badly, had a rare utterance today. After Tao Yanba heard that the fox country had disappeared, he even repented of the marriage. If it weren't for Su Hun's presence in the 5 realms, Qingfeng City has also been among the ancestors. Qiuling Mountain and Qingfeng City would have been on the Yangguan Road single-plank bridge. Go aside. However, the absence of Qingfeng City in the Fox Country was greatly hurt, and Tao Zi was too wronged to marry. Qingfeng City is indeed not as good as it is. Otherwise, if there are only a few clues, even if there are only a few suspicions based on Su Hun's realm and Qingfeng City's own background, he will marry the Yuan family of the upper pillar country of Dali plus Qiulingshan. Side, an Aquarius Island, who would dare not return the Fox Country obediently. Su Hun frowned slightly. The woman smiled far-fetched and said, "Still investigating." The white-clothed old ape held his palm against the handle of the chair. "Check what to check. Who is suspected? Go directly to the door, scrape the ground 3 feet, and then you will find it? Why, is it possible that you didn't even have a suspect in Qingfeng City?" Zhou Xian smiled and said, "Grandpa Yuan, I suspect it has something to do with Luopa Mountain, but there are Longquan Jianzong and Piyun Mountain over there, so it's not easy to make trouble. The time-honored Zongman in Aquarius can't do such a wicked thing." The white-clothed old ape glanced at this little boy who liked to wear bright red robe when he was a child and sneered, "Wan Qiong and Wei Bo are not Yupu. Besides, you are just looking for trouble in Luopa Mountain, Wan Qiong. Even if you want to mix with Wei Bo, there are many taboos. Luopa Mountain is not their next clan. How can it be difficult to make trouble? Go to the Dali court and Qingfeng City ignores the losses." Fengshua Temple in the Wei and Jin dynasties. Calligraphy and Lake Lu Laoqing, Piyun Mountain, Weibo, Xinjiang Mountain, Yuanjin page. Sword Fairy, Wild Repair, Mountain God Spirit. Different paths, one after another among the 5 realms. The key is that these few are all carrying the luck of one continent. Tao Zi smiled and said, "Grandpa Yuan, Qingfeng City has their difficulties. The matter is over, so don't add salt to the wound." The old ape in white turned his head and smiled. "Smelly girl, this is not married yet. It's the spilled water that makes Grandpa Yuan sad." Tao Zi smiled and said, "Grandpa Yuan will help move the mountain to Qingfeng City in the future. Just practice there all the year round. As for Xinjiang Mountain, where do you need to protect the mountain? There is the reputation of Grandpa Yuan who dares to come to Xinjiang Mountain to provoke. In the Yellow River in Fenglei Garden, wouldn't he only dare to show off his slight sword skills at a place so far from the Egret Crossing? I didn't dare to take a look at Grandpa Yuan." The young woman smiled cutely and the old ape in white laughed heartily. Zus woman covered her mouth and smiled. Zhou Xian smiled knowingly. Only Su was expressionless. He just pulled the corners of his mouth and started drinking tea with his head down and sighed in his heart. This little girl is really not a fuel-efficient lamp. In the future, if she marries into Qingfeng City, it will be a blessing or a curse. But as long as one can be among the fairyland, everything is easy to say. Tao Yanba glanced at Su Hun and said for no reason, "According to the spy from the Yuye Jiangshui mansion, Lu Xianyang is already a Jindanjian repairer. The scorpion armor that was refined by Su Hun to become a life thing is the ancestral thing of Lu Xianyang in Liju Dongtian." Su Hun looked calm and said, "It seems that Lu Xianyang's cultivation aptitude is indeed very good, indicating that Saint Wan has a better vision of accepting apprentices." Tao Yanba's expression changed slightly. The young Jindan Jianxiu, who had already reached the peak of Xinjiang Mountain, named Yu Lu, was an undoubted sword fairy embryo when he was young. He almost became the heir of Longquan sword sect, and was even in the ancestral mountain of Longquan sword sect. On the side of Xianxia mountain he had practiced for a period of time, but for some reason Wan Qiong finally sent such a young genius who was destined to form a pill back down the mountain. So Yulin and the other two seniors from the Longquan sword sect in the past switched to Xingyang mountain. In a meeting of the Patriarch Hall he was selected by the old sword Immortal Tao Yanbo and took him to Qiuling mountain to practice, and he received a lot of advice from Tao Yanbo. Even if he opened the peak and built the mansion later he still belonged to the sword repairman of the Qiuling mountain line. Su Hun said that Wan Qiong had a good eye for choosing apprentices, so what's the matter with Tao Yanbo's high hopes for Yulin? The Su family's woman hurriedly made a round. Missing Yulin must be a big loss for Longquan Jianzong. Yulin is now the golden core and within 100 years, Yuan Ying is expected to be a great help from Qiulingshan. Old Ancestor Tao is among the 5 realms and will be the first peak as long as the Ancestor Tao did not nod his head. The discussion in the Patriarch Hall would definitely fail. Tao Yanbo stroked his beard and smiled. Can't say that. Where do you put the sect master and Uncle Xiao? Then she picked up the teacup, held it high and began to change the subject. This celebration where the earth is like a cloud, is an unprecedented event in Aquarius Island in 1,000 years. I am here to substitute tea for wine. Congratulations to Yuanzhua. The white-clothed old ape nodded, picked up the teacup and drank it all. The protector of Xingyang Mountain suddenly said, looking back to find an opportunity, I casually slaughtered Lu Xianyang as one of Tao's dowry. Within the private mountains and rivers of Xingyang Mountain with a radius of 800 miles, there is a Nianbo River. The river temple was built beside the Cayenne Canal. The 2 monks went out for a walk and went for a night tour. Following Jiang Shangzhen and Wei Ying, Lu Laoqing, the 3rd lord of the Real Realm sect, was surrounded by the female Yuan Ying monk who was enshrined in the 2nd seat, Li Fuyu. As for the chief worshipper who came to Xingyang Mountain to congratulate him this time, the true monarch of Zhejiang, Lu Zhimao, went to drink with his friends on the mountain alone. Seeing Lu Laoqing speechless all the way, Li Fuyu went straight to Kaiyanku as if he had an appointment here. It's just that Li Fuyu is cautious by nature and she didn't ask much if the Lord herself didn't say anything. Lu Laoqing caught a glimpse of Cayenne Chu from a distance, sitting alone on the dam drinking alcohol. He was an old friend on the mountain, the old gang leader of the invincible God Fist gang Gao Mian. Lu Leicheng's mood improved a bit and he was not silent and asked casually, what's the matter with Guochuanxi from Xianyu County? I don't think he has any qualifications for cultivation, so why are you willing to accept it as an anonymous disciple? Li Fui replied, it was sect master Jiang's intention. He gave Guochuanxi a token and asked this person to go to Miaoliu Island. Then he named him and said that he wanted to see me. How dare I take it lightly? Lu Laoqing nodded and it made sense. Jiang Shangzhen did things based on his preferences and there was no common sense. Today's Xinjing sect, there is actually no obvious Shantao faction. At most it is Lu Zhimao who is estranged from his sovereign. It's not that both Lu Laoqing and Lu Zhimao are so pure-hearted and unwilling to have power and power. On the contrary, the 2 Shanggu realms of Zhenjingzong who were born in Shanzuixiu, a fairy, a jade, a Miaoliu Island and a Xianxia Island. All in places like Shijian Hufang had been the leader of the alliance and commanded the heroes. How could he only know how to cultivate? But the 2 previous sect masters from Tongyi's Hao, plus the old sect master Sun Yuan, which won the city and the methods, did not make people feel palpitating. Lu Laoqing walked to Gao Mian's side and greeted with a smile. Lao Gao. Gao Mian turned his head, glanced at Li Fuyu and complained, I don't know how to be the lord with the 2 younger girls. Lu Laoqing smiled and sat aside. Even if Li Fui was embarrassed, he was helpless. He knew how this old gang leader was. What's more, Li Fui also knows an inside story. In the past, the old master Sun traveled to Aquarius Island alone, and he made a special trip to find Gao Mian to reminisce about the past. Therefore both Jiang Shangzhen and Wei Ying are extremely respectful to Gao Mian. Li Fuyu naturally didn't dare to make any trouble. Moreover, the invincible Shenquan gang, the fairy family sect on the mountain, during that battle the disciples in the door suffered heavy casualties, especially Gao Mian. It is said that on the battlefield by the Dadu Bank, the Chongqing Bridge was almost directly interrupted by a great monster. Saved the Golden Core realm. So Gao Mian, who is notoriously fond of beauty, is not ashamed. Tonight just don't fret and move. Li Fuhuai was willing to endure nonsense. Lu Laoqing took a pot of wine thrown by Gao Mian and took a big sip on his back. Gao Mian said, I will definitely not meet Fairy He, but I don't know if I can see Fairy Su. Lu Laoqing shook his head and said, Sujia is no longer a sword repairer and Xingyang Mountain is not a humane place. She is unlikely to come back. Gao Mian said, It's okay if you don't return. Lu Laoqing asked, Where is the school? Gao Mian grinned. Before I came to Xingyang Mountain I had already given way. A gold pill, no face to give orders. The only pity is that the invincible Shunquan gang is such a good name. It is estimated that I will be yelled by those hooligans. We changed it. Lu Laoqing said, Don't not like to listen. From now on, whether you are a helper or not, Zhen Jingzong and I will help stare at your family business. Gao Mian waved his hand. I don't like to listen, Lao Lu, you punish yourself for half a pot anyway, you are drunk and Sister Fu Yi carries you back, remember to be honest with both hands. Lu Laoqing said, I intend to let Li Fuyu serve as the worship of your gang. Gao Mian nodded, whatever, I don't care now as long as Sister Fu Hua doesn't feel the price is falling. Li Fuyi said, I am extremely happy. Gao Mian turned his head, leaned forward, stretched out his hand to push away Lu Leicheng's head, looked at Li Fuyu and asked, Why, I am subdued by Gao's heroic spirit and have secretly admired him for a long time? Li Fuyi smiled and said, Really not. Gao Mian asked, Do you like the little white faces like Jiang Shangzhen and Wei Ying? Li Fuyu's scalp was numb and he was silent. Gao Mian retracted his hand, bumped into Lu Leicheng's flask and drank each. Gao Mian looked around and there were plum blossoms planted by the Cayenne Canal. The old man sighed, How blessed are the mountain people except this plum blossom. Lu Laoqing suddenly said in his heart, Lao Gao, don't be so listless. You can't see your favorite fairy in beauty, but there's fun to watch. Gao Mian sneered and said, It's lively? The Yellow River's like that. I don't think it's interesting. But when the next time the Yellow River Wenjian first line peak, I will definitely come to see it with my own eyes. Lu Laoqing smiled and stopped talking. Gao Mian wondered, How lively? Lu Laoqing pointed at the peak. Gao Mian asked in shock, Where is it sacred, so courageous? Lu Laoqing sold it off, Just wait. Gao Mian took a sip of wine. No matter what, as long as you dare to make trouble on the front line, it doesn't matter whether you succeed or not. I will give this person a thumbs up. It's a man. A wine bureau on the mountain had an early appointment, and the old man reunited here. When they arrived at different peaks of Xingyang Mountain, they left their teachers and elders and then rushed to the party for a drink. Among them, Han Jingling, as the monarch of a country, was able to have a separate house on this peak. In addition to Han Jingling, who was already the emperor of the state of Shihao, Huang He, who has served as the Book of War for several years, Tian Hujuan, who has Lu Zimeo's eldest disciple, and her two juniors, Qin Nao and Chao Zhi and Huangladeo Island. LV Kaisang, the master's junior, Yuan Yuan, the master of Gumming Island, who is nicknamed Yuan Yuan, and that Fan Yen, once a fool in everyone's eyes, is now the master of Qishui City. So except for Guqin, everyone is here. In the end, what everyone talked about was naturally around Guqin, the direct disciple of Xing Juzhong, who once brought them together. It's just that everyone deliberately or unintentionally bypassed the other person, the Qingshan foreigner who worked as the accountant on Xianxia Island. Immortal Han Koz, and Lu Daochun's nephew of Liuli Pavilion, Xiaobei Fu Sus Jr. After leaving the Shujian Lake, Guqin, the demon king of the world, like a carp jumped into the dragon gate, and climbed to the sky in one step. Moreover, it is rumored that Guqin himself is already a mountain monk in the Yupu realm, and he has the title of Madman in the Middle-earth Shenzhou. Each piece of Guqin's piece by piece is very good at serving wine tonight. Probably except Tian Hujuan, who has a different mindset, everyone else feels that they can meet Guqin in Shijianhu and Yu Rongyan. At the banquet, there were more than a dozen glazed women in colorful clothes. Although they were puppets, they danced gracefully with their joints twisted and creaking. And the master of Tian Hujuan, Lu Zimeo's visit tonight, is the deputy head of the Linlu Academy of Faiyin Mountain, Huang Tingwo's 10,000-year-old Jiao, who seems to have been deliberately suppressing the environment. Because Lu Jimao practiced water law, he knew the old Jiao from the past. In fact, Lu Zimeo's relationship with the Jiaolong in the Fengshui cave of the Qiantang River is not bad. Lu Jimao asked a long-timely curious question, Why did you deliberately give up that piece of luck that should belong to you to Yuan Zhinya? The old Jiao, who looked like an old Confucian scholar, smiled and said, I am a small water descent, how can I dare to compete with the great sage moving to break the ground? Lu Jimao smiled and toasted, it makes sense. On the side of Yunfeng, mountain gods from all over the continent gather, headed by the mountain Saiji, the mountain of the Prince of Nanyue. The nearby Shuilong Peak is the top of Yanchu, the ancestor of Xinjiang Mountain Zhanglu. Various water gods and daffodils meet here, headed by the water of Yongjiang, who has the highest rank. 2 waves of landscape gods are pushing their cups and changing cups tonight, because drinking is not so casual at the celebration. On the full moon peak of the patriarch Xianxia, the distinguished guests from the Jiang family in Yunlin settled here. In fact, all the young children of the Jiang family came here, but all of them have special identities. The gentleman of Guanhu Academy is Zhou Xian, and the master is Lu Laoqing. Jiang Yun married faraway Jiang Xing from the Fu family in Old Longqing, and 2 other guests without the surname Jiang. Among them, Fu Nanhua had gone to meet friends elsewhere in the mountains. The 2 husbands and wives are close together, respectful and do not interfere with each other. As for that Wei Liang, who had been transferred step by step from the chief governor of the Qingwan country to the Zhuo assistant minister of the official staff of Dali, like Fu Nanhua, he left Full Moon Peak and looked for drinks. The previous polite words of the Su family's woman were actually not all compliments. The time and the place are right and the people are in harmony. It seems that they are all in Xinjiang Mountain. Today, within a radius of 800 miles, there are so many cultivators from the earth, which is really rare. Therefore, at a banquet, a monk with a genealogy drank too much and asked his friends around him. It would take a few yellow rivers to successfully ask the sword. Some people say that there are at least 3 and some people say that there are 5 yellow rivers. After all, no matter how good the yellow river is, no matter how high it is in swordsmanship, it is now in the Yuaning state. Now Xinjiang Mountain, even if you don't talk about the guests from all walks of life, they have 2. A monk in the 5 realms. In addition, the 3 Yuan Ing Lao Jianxian, the sovereign Zhu Huang, Tao Yanbo and Yan Chu, said that they have given the Yellow River a lot of face. Talking about this happily, and at the end of the discussion, I came to a conclusion that he was a great monk in the Ascension realm, and he didn't dare to make trouble here. Messed up. On a Dali official ferry heading to Xinjiang Mountain, the owner was Chao Ping, the second patrolling envoy in the history of Dali. Guaniran came to eat and drink. He was drinking a bowl of iced plum wine in a cabin house. The other 2 people at the wine table were friends for many years. Yu Shanfang and Chi-Chi, they followed Guan. Like Iran, they were all accompanied by the Dali Frontier Army monk. Chi-Chi, a female from Fengshua Temple, is slender, but she carries a large sword with an extremely wide scabbard. As for Yu Shanfang, who has withdrawn from the battlefield for many years, he has become rich. As a child of the Guan family in Yunzai County of Izhou, Guan Iran first joined the army and served as a monk in the border army. With his military merits, he climbed step by step among the Dali Frontier Army. Dali cavalry went south and Guan Iran became responsible for garrisoning Shijianhu. The garrison general in Yunlu City later, along with civil servant Lu Qingfeng, and Lu Xuanmei, who was also the seed brother of the general, served as the Dadu supervisor. After Guan Iran stepped down from the post of Chidu supervisor, he filled the vacancy at the Jingqing household department. At that time he was not promoted to one like Lu Qingfeng. The minister, Guan Iran, the grandson of Guan Lao Shangshu, was not as good as an outsider like Lu Qingfeng. At that time in Dali capital, especially Cheer Street and Ichi Lane, he provoked a lot of speculation and most of them were injustice. In the early years, Yu Shanfang, under the instruction of Guan Iran, served as one of the newly established transport supervisors in Dali that year, and took charge of the mountain ferry route along the Longdao. The waterway of the mountain dynasty and the ferry route of the ferry house on the mountain. One is flowing with a steady stream of silver, and the other is flowing with ferry money. The supervising officer, the highest official grade, was originally the 3rd grade of Dalijing and later upgraded to a level. From the 2nd grade, the general administration of supervision was built on the bank of Dadu, not in the accompanying capital of Dali, and was responsible for the size of Aquarius. More than 30 small mountain routes. Wait until the end of the war, Dallas territory has been reduced by half, so now there are only less than 20. Yu Shanfang is in charge of the North-South Dragon Road, which is extremely important, so even if the official rank is not too high, it is only from the 4th rank, but he belongs to the first group of old people in the supervision administration and has real power. Taking the Longdao route is extremely important. It is a location with a lot of oil and water, so in the past 2 decades, Yu Shanfeng has been doing quite well in the officialdom of Dali. In addition to his responsibilities, he had a lot of dealings with various immortal masters on the continent, and accumulated a lot of friendship on the mountain. The food served with wine on the table was a big pot of drunk shrimp. Guan Yiran said in amazement. Yeah, Lao Yu, you are very good at being an official now. Do you know how to pay a bribe? This big basin is not an ordinary river prawn, but the Helong in the Longdao. It is nicknamed Yingzi to the south of Aquarius Island. It is the heart of the old gluttons up and down the mountain. Guan Yiran held a bowl in one hand and fiddled with the drunken silver with chopsticks in the other. Most of them were half an inch long, but there were also a few helongs with a finger length. He picked one of them and gave him a chopstick to Chi. Said, "We can be regarded as the light of supervising luck. Today's food is all real money." Yu Shanfeng scolded with a smile. The bribery of your uncle was bought by Lao Tzu with his own salary, not eating it. Guan Yiran stepped on the bench and hooked his shoulders. After Chi chewed slowly, Guan Yiran and Yu Shanfeng secretly raised their brows, and Yu Shanfeng smiled. Chi put down his chopsticks and left the house to find someone to chat. She came from the military monk in the Great Vulture Valley of Xianxia Temple, and this time there is another generation higher than her, Wen Qingfeng, who also served as a monk in the Dali army for many years. However, Xianxia Temple had a very poor view of Xingyang Mountain, especially the Daoigu where Chi was located, so she went down the mountain this time, and the senior Wen Qingfeng was just gathering with friends, and waited until the ferry was near Xingyang Mountain. We'll disembark. On the ferry tonight, in addition to Guan Yiran, the official in Beijing, there is also Lu Xuanmei who is accompanying the capital. However, Guan Yiran was once a military commander under Su Gaoshan, but Lu Xuanmei was a real Chao Ping confidant. On the bow side, Chi saw the woman who wore a large lean army sword, still dressed like that throughout the year. As long as the armor is removed, it is a narrow-sleeved brocade dress, black gauze pants, a pair of embroidered shoes and shoes. The pointed pendant has 2 Longan's orb. Chi called to Uncle Yu. She turned her head and nodded, her expression unchanged. Chi has long been accustomed to it, and the only one who can make Shu Yu Huiting smile is probably only the Shishizu from the Xianxia Temple Xianxiantai. Chao Ping was a well-known Confucian general of the Dali court, with a graceful manner. At this moment the hunter's face was extremely awkward. Chao Jun, whose ancestral home is in Ni Ping Lane, used to be Lu Sunmai's right-hand man, but according to his generation it was Chao Ping's ancestor. Therefore the 3 of you, Chao Jun, who is a fool, retired from the Dali army for many years and traveled to Tongyi's house. At this time he was busy with Lu Xuanmei, the former boss of the past, and he was very cynical. The title Lu Xuanmei can only watch the nose and the heart like sitting on pins and needles, and Chao Ping also doesn't say a word. I really don't know how to call Chao Jun the young swordsman. According to the family tree, although there is no sword in the seniority fairy Chao, she is so tall. And Li Zhu, the line of the Chao family in Dongtian, has also been divided into different branches, but Chao Jun's seniority is still there. At dawn, a young Taoist with a hostile hairpin and a green yarn robe walked down the mountain from Guyunla to Bailadu. There is a hustle and bustle near the ferry, and there are constant genealogy immortal masters who have obtained customs clearance. They sacrificed immortal talisman boats or rode various immortal bird mounts to the peaks of Xingyang Mountain. Shanzi Yeshi will basically turn around, settle down in surrounding cities and counties. After walking for half an hour, the young Taoist returned to the mountain. He never thought that Ni Yuerong would be waiting at the door. He said that the inn had prepared an early breakfast and begged Xianxia Chao to appreciate it. Never thought that the real Taoist person still declined this matter, which made Ni Yuerong's heart angry, really putting on a big air. When Qin Pingon returned to the viewing platform, Lu Xianying was still sleeping soundly in a wicker chair. Walking to the railing, Qin Pingon hesitated whether to hide his figure secretly and go to the immortal back Jianfeng alone. Just think about it or give it up temporarily. Nowadays, 1 continent and 5 sacred mountains, the Song family of Dali and the sect on the mountain, all avoid talking. Once the entire Ayapingzu was surnamed Song. The 5 sacred mountains of the Dai dynasty were the 5 sacred mountains of Aquarius. When the Song clan of Dali abides by the covenant and actively surrendered nearly half of the country, allowing the major vassals to become independent, and the new Daoist territory was reduced by half, then the removal of the remaining 4 mountains of Beiyue would be somewhat mysterious. Therefore only Piyun Mountain and Weibo are the most leisurely. No matter how it was changed, Beiyue was fine. The most embarrassing situation was the Emperor Jinqing of Zhongyue Mountain on the old Zhuing map. Because Zhongyue turned out to be the southernmost mountain in the new Dali realm, and changing the name of the mountain was not just a simple change of the name on the Song family's landscape genealogy of Dali. Not only would Zhongyue itself hurt his muscles and bones, it would also be involved. The head of the prince and all the mountains and rivers within its jurisdiction. I heard that Jinqing was on Weibo's side and he always ate a lot of food, not taking advantage of it. But among the mountain monarchs, Jinqing really likes to compete with Weibo, and from time to time Feijian sends a letter to Piyun Mountain. Said that a great writer has a cliff-cut list and handed down a poem. Of course, he will humbly ask Weibo about the knowledge of holding a night party. After all, in this matter Wei Shanjun is an old senior and it is recognized by several continents. In fact, the nickname of Wei Yeo was first spread from Luopa Mountain. It seems that Qin Lingjun was the first to propose, and then he was promoted by the incense guy who came to Luopa Shen on time and brought him back to Ziqingwang. Now this guy is surrounded by a group of young people, saying that he wants to help the leader Pei Qian. In the state city while building a small subrudder, practicing martial arts every day, carrying a small tree branch as a spear and going back and forth, the whole Longzhou knew about Wei Yeo, and the spread of Longzhou was equivalent to the whole Beiyue boundary. Qin Lingjun killed him without confessing, saying that Wei Shanjun had killed him unjustly. At that time the boy in Xingyi was standing on the stone table beside the cliff, crying, beating his chest and swearing, saying he was such a person? It must be the old cook who drank and talked faint, otherwise it's Pei Qian, it must be her. This guy has the ability to nickname people. Luo Pashan claims to be second and no one dares to be the first. Besides, it may be a mistake of the word for millet grains. In short, it became a mess. The truth of the matter was the first statement that Pei Qian made, but back then she joked with Nuanshu and Xiaomili in private, and then when Zhoumili heard this statement was so coquettish, loud and tolerated when visiting the mountain. I kept chanting a few words, but after that he listened to Qin Lingjun. The speaker had no intention of the listener's heart, and the ghosts and gods made the later Ming Dong Bei Yu. As a result, the Zhou Qinghuang, who had never taken officialdom seriously, almost had to visit Piyun Mountain in person to apologize and plead guilty to Shanjun Weibo. No matter how it conforms to the facts, it cannot be put on the table to bury people. Weibo, who is a big Beiyue land boundary and also in charge of the Longxing land of the Daisong clan, is he really a gentleman and gentleman Shanjun? How did the mountain Song Yuzhang, who moved from Luopa Mountain to Chiduan Mountain, end? Is this a matter of officialdom? What did Weibo go to the border between Beiyue and Zhongyue? Stop by. It is obvious that Jinqing, who is also Deiyue Mountain monarch, will make a move as long as he does not bow his head. On the map of Aquarius Island, Weibo was the first mountain to be among the 5 realms, and the first mountain to become the fairyland. Will he still be the first mountain to ascend to the Ascension realm? Judging from the current situation, the suspense is not big as long as Dali Songshur can save a continent and a half of the country. That incense villain was really terrified. He rarely saw Zhou Qinghuang so serious and really angry. It stood timidly in the censer at the time, clenching its rim with both hands. In the past I always ran away from home. In fact, every time I just walked around and went home. For example, I went home in Luopa Mountain and returned home in Mantu Mountain near Hongzhou town. Fortunately, the guy was only dark for a long time, sitting on the threshold and sulking, and finally just said something to it, "Don't talk nonsense in the future." Qin Lingjun actually has a guilty conscience, but he still has a stubborn mouth. He comforted a few words with the incense villain, saying that it is wrong to make a mistake and it is human nature. Besides, our brothers also recognize mistakes. It's not that they don't admit it. Wei Shanjun wants to beat or scold, and whoever wrinkles is a fool. Qin Lingjun comforted the little guy with bashful eyebrows and drooping eyes. At this point, the boy in Xingyi and the little incense guy standing on the stone table looked at each other and laughed because they both, in fact, none of them are human. The more the incense villain laughed, the more he found it ridiculous. It wasn't enough to laugh with his belly, and he rolled on the table. "Today you just came here to relax." He looked at the big and the small on the table beside the table. His eyes were gentle. After seated, he looked at the melon seeds on the table and asked with a smile, "That's it?" Qin Lingjun rolled his eyes and said, "The millet grains are not at home and I don't know where she hides the seeds. Save a little bit. If you are not a good brother, Can you divide you so much? Look at this guy, it's just a melon seed no more. The incense villain who was cutting the mountain of a melon seed nodded vigorously, then suddenly looked at each other with Qin Lingjun and laughed. It has been here for so many years, rain or shine, to come here. Peiqian, Jingqing, Wanshu and millet grains are all reasons. These 3 ate melon seeds, and Qin Lingjun asked casually, Yumi, are you not good at practicing swordsmanship? I heard that it hasn't been broken for many years. Qin Lingjun added, nothing else, don't think too much. Miyu smiled and said, to be honest, the qualifications are okay, but it's not too bad. Qin Lingjun said angrily, well, on my brother's side, what is he talking about? He's very handsome. Why is he still swollen and fat? I don't allow you to abuse yourself. Miyu angrily smiled and said, what kind of damned customs and customs? Qin Lingjun said, hee. If you don't have the qualifications, you can't do it. It's a good thing to tell your brothers to be happy. Master Peiqian and the millet grains are not at home, and the stupid girl in Wanshu is busy with that, so it is a little bored. The incense villain coughed to remind brother Jingqing not to float too much. Yumi is a sword repairer anyway, don't hide too much. Miyu smiled and said, I lied to you to do something, bragging, and you can't eat it as a meal. The qualifications are indeed improvised. Miyu was ranked in the 5th state at the age of 7, entered the Golden Core at the age of 19, and broke through at the age of 42 Yuan Ing. After that was stagnant for a long time. When I bumped into the Jade Pu realm, I started to beat thunder again. Luo Shan, a line of hidden officials in the old summer residence, likes the deepness facing the wall, and Kai Fan Nailan Sihuan, who are considered to be peer sword repairers. They all looked up at him back then. Qi Shou is a very young junior, fighting the way of fighting or taking the old road of Miyu. Of course, this is not to say that Miyu is the first to walk. Nailan Yexing Yen Ming have walked earlier. There will be older sword repairs. The earliest is probably Longjun. It may be because Miyu was too beautiful when he was young, especially when he was in the Jindan and Yuanying 2 realms. His experience of killing monsters was so beautiful. Even the former hermit of the Summer Palace, Xiao Deng, looked at Miyu with admiration, especially Miyu. The fierce killing methods among the sword immortals. In fact, Wu Qingpei and Tao Wen have a very good impression of Miyu, but they have never spoken for Miyu in public. So later Jinchi Great Wall's mockery of Miyu was to a large extent a kind of disappointment, mourning his misfortune and angering him. He was such a genius sword repairman who was hailed as a candidate for the pinnacle at a young age. Became a soft embroidered pillow. How could it be so difficult for Cotton Waste to break through the bottleneck of Yuanying? After entering the upper 5 realms, the sword is not half the style of Yuanying that year. Jinxing was ruined. Otherwise, the old people, young people, and even children of the Great Wall of Jinchi would not be so picky about a sword repair in the Yupu realm. Sun Jian, Gao Kuei, etc., are they all in the Yupu realm? Why is there not so much infamy? Qin Lingjun said, Yumi, if you feel bored in the mountains, I can take you out to play Huang Tingguo's Yujiang River, don't you know? What is fragrant and spicy? Every banquet, those female officials from the Water God Mansion, tut. With a graceful posture, a very beautiful man, that water snake waist, that big scorpion. Of course, I don't think there is anything good. One by one wears so little, the cloth shops under the world cannot be opened, but every after drinking, a large group of drunk masters, their eyes like a flying sword, swish, swish, and post it all. Haha, Yumi, you are the sword repairer. The incense villain started to laugh again. Qin Lingjun stared, silly and cheerful. Uncle Qin was talking about business with his brother. The incense villain put away his laughter in a thunderous manner. His mother was in vain. Officialdom is difficult to mix. Miyu smiled and said, good intentions. But I don't have to go out. I am nostalgic and don't like moving nests. It's good to stay in the mountains. Actually, there are only 2 places I want to go. The Kaik Mansion, where I have been in the north for a few years, the old Dragon City in the south. I heard that nowadays the Immortal Masters drive the mountains into the sea, and several big clans including the Fu family are beginning to rebuild the old Dragon City. And what makes me never forget is the old Dragon City. Hiwapu, the southernmost place, was Mayu's biggest regret. Say no, it's gone. That was the first time he set foot on the vast land of the world, the first scenery he saw. Qin Lingjun asked, Master, why did you go to the south? Miyu smiled and said, there is a sword to pass. Qin Lingjun said nothing more. Song He, the emperor of the Dai dynasty, left Beijing for the first time and was stationed in the accompanying capital. Soon we will cruise Zhongyue and go to the old Dragon City site to pay tribute to the heroes. King Song-mu accompanied the emperor out of the city today. The two brothers, the emperor and feudal king who had changed their names on the genealogy of the clan mansion, walked together by the Chidu water. The worship and obedience of De Li just followed from a distance. Song Jisun joked, "Why didn't your majesty go to the Confucian temple and watch the old gods on the Hauran mountain in one breath? This kind of opportunity, but if you miss it there will be no more. What a pity." Song He smiled and said, "If you want to go you definitely want to go, but the emperor is more suitable to speak for Dali over there. If I had just become the emperor I would definitely complain a few words in my heart and forget it now." On the other side of the capital, Mr. Guan from the official department of the old Xianxia, the scholar named Guan Yingche, an ordinary master who lived to be 100 years old, had gone for many years. There are also a few elderly people with the surname of Shangju State, who are the backbone of Ichi Lane and Cheer Street, and they are the mainstay of the Dai dynasty. They helped the Dai Song dynasty win the Luxia dynasty and lay down a continent. Shanhe. In the end they themselves couldn't beat the ruthless years. Lu Qingfeng, the old Shangshu from the Ministry of Rites at the accompanying capital, was already sick. Many old people in Dai Temple, even the civilian officials who do not need to rush to the battlefield, are getting old one by one, and then some people are too old to walk, cannot go to the court and have to leave the officialdom one by one. It seems that only Jingshi Huomu is the oldest, Guanjia Shuwu, the green tongs outside, the vines with purple clouds hanging down the ground and the fragrance of flowers in the streets of the Han family, and a peony from Baogua Temple are still fortunate enough to meet the spring breeze every year. The mansion of the national teacher Cui Yong in the capital was large. It used to be an old mansion, but inside it was simple, with a small two-story book building named Rinyun Iyun building by the national teacher. Now there is no owner. The emperor smiled and said, "The feng shui turns, making people dizzy." Many scholars of the Song dynasty of Dali, when they were a vassal state of the Lu dynasty in the early years, had too many glorious landscape poems and travel notes for this suzerain country. The native people of the clan dynasty are more like the Lu clan. Write oneself. Dallas native land is lacking in talents, but writing about the Lu dynasty Wensi Quanyong, even if you want to search for intestines you must write. It is said that the traffickers and pawns of the Lu dynasty can chant poems and are full of scholarly families. The fairy winds on the mountains are the bones, the rivers and lakes are arrogant and righteous, and the roads are not superfluous. The Dali poems at that time were all written in the wind and sand of the frontier fortress, written by the hooves of the horses, and they sang with the poems in the wind and snow. Song Hexiao asked, "Is it just our Aquarius Island? The mountain is not high, the water is not deep, and the cultivators are not so gods?" At the foot of the mountain the Dali dynasty once stood on the top of the mountain. The monks on the mountain who violate the ban will kill without mercy. Song Jisun replied, "Half is the sound of the horses' hoofs of the Dali cavalry, and half is the credit of the national teacher." Song He asked again, "Is it the wrong order?" Song Jisun smiled and said, "Your Majesty is extremely true." Song He is Cui Yang's disciple and Song Jisun is Qi Jingchun's student. Song He stopped and turned his head, looking at the distinguished King Dali, his nominal brother and de facto elder brother, and said, "I owe you a lot, but I will not do anything to you in this matter. Any compensation?" Song Jisun smiled and said, "Your Majesty, don't say anything like this anymore. I just pretend that I haven't heard it today." Song He said with emotion, "It is a great fortune for the country to have an uncle in Dali." Song Jisun nodded and said, "There is no doubt." Song He followed and laughed, "In fact, the problem is not complicated. As long as you live longer than me, it will be fine for 3 to 5 years, 10 years. What do you think?" The Dali domain prince in front of him, it seems that he is not the middle 5 realm chi practitioner Lujin realm? Is it really a state of staying? But have you learned some physical skills? Song Jisun smiled and asked, "What should I do if I live more than 10 years? Song He smiled and said, "Then say it again." Song Jisun smiled and said, "As a courtier, of course you listen to your Majesty." Song He asked, "Why is Mr. Shirley determined that the two worlds will fight again?" Song Jisun shook his head and said, "The idea of the national teacher anyway. I can't understand the ordinary master." The emperor called Cui Yong Mr., and the kings respectfully called Cui Yong the national teacher. There is a difference between relatives. The Dai dynasty was the only dynasty in Hauran, and when the war ended, it had already begun preparations for the next battle. The paper contract that Emperor Dai announced to Ezhou is clearly written in black and white. As long as there is enough warfare, Dai will return the mountains and rivers of various countries after the war and restore the country. Dai Song has indeed kept its promise. Now only Heide is left. Half of the time is not that continent or a country, and in the vast history of the world, only the Dali Song family can achieve this feat. The emperor whispered, "We all seem to get old soon." Song Jisun smiled and said, "I heard that Qingming Xianxia and the latest Wuxia Xianxia do not have this rule. The dynasty officials in the Qingming world, from temples to places, even must have a Taoist priest to be an official. And the emperors over there are often high-level practitioners, so compared to the dynasties and vassals in the Haoran world, there are more dynasties in the country life of 1,000 years in the Qingming world." The emperor finally asked a question. "If things go wrong, what should you and I do?" Song Jisun smiled and replied, "Now that the war is about to come, what does your majesty care about the grievances on these mountains?" A young began to leave the station with the army and went to a mountain ferry. "I heard that there is going to be another war. As for where to go or who to fight with, it doesn't matter. Every time the Dali cavalry is mobilized, wherever the horse's hoof reaches, what the soldier points at is a big victory. Life can be lost, but war cannot be lost." The Dali military commander who uttered this bold rhetoric was named Zhou Xian, and the Dali patrolling envoy who made his official rank to the highest position of the military minister did what he said. The cavalry passed by a rural village. The young horseman turned his head and looked at a hillside. A group of children frolicking over there, jumping for joy, began to chase their cavalry. In fact, the young man who had been in the army for a few years, smiled, raised his arm and banged heavily on his chest. Many years ago he used to run on the side of the ridge. At that time, there was also a great iron cavalry soldier under the mountain who made the same movement. "I am the only one who is a great Li, a famous minister like a cloud, a fierce general like rain and a great armor. At noon Xianxia lean on the railing. The cloud is under your feet." Lu Xianying stretched his waist, twisted his wrist and jumped twice. Qin Pingon slowly rolled up his sleeves and stomped his feet lightly. The lotus crown and the green yarn robe disappeared together. Tingshan backs the sword. Lu Xianying looked ahead and smiled. "Be careful yourself. Uncle, I have to climb the mountain step by step. I once thought about choosing a mid-autumn festival full moon night, sleepwalking alone and asking Jian's Henjiang mountain. It's just that it's better to ask Jian this time because there are more people." Qin Pingon smiled and nodded. About half an hour it was the Xingyang mountain celebration. Many monks were already on the first-line peak of Zhu mountain or were on their way. Among the peaks, there are countless sword lights and flowing fireflies, flocking to the first-line peaks. Lu Xianying's fingers intertwined. "One is not careful, I'm already in the Jade Realm." Qin Pingon said, "It's a coincidence, I just returned to my true spirit." Lu Xianying said with a bright smile, "Today, let the monks from this continent know that the uncle's surname is very famous. Everyone knows that in the past years, Li Zhu Dongtian, the man with the best aptitude for swordsmanship and the most handsome appearance, his original surname Lu Ming Xianying." Qin Pingon narrowed his eyes and nodded and said, "Okay, good, amazing. Today's two sword repairmen, like the two former young friends, have to jump high over a dragon-beard river." Lu Xianying raised his palm high and Qin Pingon gave him a high five. Lu Xianying took the lead to rise from the ground, his figure resembling a Chonghong pierced through the air, and he landed directly at the foot of a mountain peak and said loudly, "Sword asker Lu Xianying." Sword of Coming Chapter 8:19. Lu Xianying appeared today with neither a saber nor a backed sword and empty-handed. In fact, I originally wanted to carry a sword, so I pretended to be a sword repairer, but seeing Qin Pingon carrying a sword, the key point was that he looked like a dog, so I had to give it up. At this moment, Lu Xianying was calm and relaxed, with arms around his chest, just standing not far from the archway at the gate of the mountain, looking up at the word Xingyang on the plaque, and then the expression on his face gradually became awkward. Before that guy Qin Pingon joked with him saying that your name is good, does it mean to envy Xingyang mountain? I was stunned by Lu Xianying for a long time. He was disgusted and broke. He drank a pot of boring wine and didn't relieve his spirit. Xingyang mountain is really a crime. Ming'er asked Jian. You have to make an opinion with their patriarch Hall. Juchun, change your name. Yesterday I was drinking at Guiyun Tower. Apart from joking, Qin Pingon threw out a booklet, saying that the sword might be needed tomorrow. Lu Xianying flipped through it casually, only remembering a general idea but didn't care. The older generations such as Zhu Huang, Xia Yunsui, Tao Yanba, Yan Chu etc. These old sword immortals. What is the life of the flying sword? What is the style of the sword and what killers are there? There are detailed records above. There are also young sword fairies of the younger generation, especially those who are likely to be the first to show up to ask the sword Lu Yu Yu Lu Wu Tijing Yuan Bai. None of them fall in the booklet, they are all on the list. It's not that Lu Xianying is arrogant, he really looks above him to the point of defiance. But when a person has a friend named Qin Pingon by his side, he will have no worries and feel extremely relaxed. However, Lu Xianying is indeed very confident. He has been like this since he was a child. He learns everything quickly. Not only is he quick to get started, he only needs to spend a little thought and he can enter the room with anything, just like porcelain firing dozens of craftsmanship links in every pass. Knowledge, but Lu Xianying has only spent half a year of work, and he has gained the mastery of his master's decades of skill accumulation. The old man Yao's critical-sighted dragon kiln head can only say a few basic principles other than craftsmanship. What kind of porcelain is made from fire, but all the anger has faded and it is considered the best one. The longer the object is left behind, like being placed in the water, it will be quietly sharpened for hundreds of years, and the more it will see the light. Qin Pingon is going to be a little stupid and serious about doing things, so he can only follow behind him obediently and learn how to learn, but not well. Lu Xianying didn't worry a little bit. Since he had already asked about the sword, it didn't matter who would take the sword. It's best to just drag it like this so that the monks on the continent inside and outside Jingyang Mountain could experience more of Uncle Liu's Yushu Linfeng. Looking at the plaque, Lu Xianying was really upset, so he simply withdrew his gaze and began to close his eyes and rest. At that time Yufeng came here from the inn, looked back at the Yunlu on the way and found that Qin Pingon was missing. I don't know where this guy is sneaking. Anyway, it was definitely not the sword top at the first line peak ancestor hall. Otherwise it would have been open, and he was asking the sword at the gate of the mountain, so Qin Pingon is still kind and does not steal the limelight. There are not too many such friends, one is enough. The dream of thousands of years is refined every day, and people who travel for thousands of years at night. That's me, Lu Xianying. Bailu crossed over to Wei Yueshan and hurriedly rushed to the mountain to pass the Yunlu, and then looked at each other with his junior sister Ni Yuerong. And the friend who lives with Chao Imo in this Jiazifeng is not a Shanzi Yeshio from the old dragon city? How could he suddenly become Lu Xianying of Longquan Jianzong? Can be seen from this that it is beyond doubt that the Taoist man wearing a lotus crown is fake. But the young Taoist under the pseudonym Chao Imo, the blue gauze Taoist robe on his body, is well woven, covered with water and cloud air, and holding a white jade Ganoderma in his hand. It is the finishing touch to the Taoism of the hermit mountain guest. Chao Imo, how immortal! Even if this fellow said that he was not a member of the Taoist school, no one would believe it. At least Qing Wufeng, the senior brother and sister until this moment, felt that the person was just falsely reporting his name, and he must be a Taoist immortal master with a reputation for Taoism and Taoism. Could it be that this trip was for Lu Xianying's mortal questioning sword, leaning on the lotus crown above his head to protect the way? Ni Yuerong was crying, and she hated that Lu Xianying was so tired and crooked that she didn't find a good place to die, and she hated that accomplice Chao Imo. Ni Yuerong smashed the wicker chair behind her. That was obvious if she didn't even look at it. She stamped her feet. These two who have suffered thousands of swords are so immortal. They leaked from me to the frontline peak to cause trouble. The patriarch and ancestors were angry and turned back to blame me for doing things badly. What should I do? Wei Yueshan comforted. It's not necessarily all bad things. There is a saying at the foot of the mountain that people build houses and don't make trouble or prosper. It's a little bump, but it will be a good thing. These two hidden heads and tails are not the Yellow River. I guess it's a golden core sword immortal, plus a Taoist monk in the nascent soul realm. Just the two of them, they are not difficult to tremble with their majesty. Here we are destined to not make any waves. Just to help cheer up. Ni Yuerong nodded lightly, but she couldn't hide her sad expression. Her eyes were moisturized, full of grievances. On the square outside the Zushitang gate on the top of Yixianfeng, there are only the young female nuns from Qiangzifeng Wamafeng, and the flowers and fruits that are still busy with many seats. It is expensive and courteous, the seating arrangement. Every chair there should not be the slightest error in the placement and seating, otherwise it would offend people, so they need to lead a group of people to their seats when they look back. At this moment, There is no Xingyang Mountain Sword Immortal who is watching over here because it is not necessary. This mountain gate is heavily forbidden. The mountain top sword energy is vertical and horizontal, dense and flawless. The sword energy is strong. The sword intent is heavy, leaving nothing at the top of the mountain. Flowers, plants and trees can survive and grow, and even the mountain peaks and stone walls have to be tempered with formations and spells to prevent them from falling apart. Therefore, the Patriarch Hall itself is a natural mountain protection formation. Even they need to wear the secret of Xingyang Mountain. Only by making fasting cards can you walk freely and breathe smoothly. Change to the ordinary Jindan sword repair. Climb to the top without authorization and stay here like a questioning sort of great disparity. If you are careless, you will trigger sword chi. If you are lucky, you will be severely injured and go down the mountain. I confess my wealth and life to the top line. These beautiful Yingjianians, although they are busy at the moment, they are in order and all of them are full of joy. They occasionally whisper and talk about those young handsome men who move around the world, such as Wu Tijing on their mountain, and Xia Ling from Longquan Jianzong, as well as Yu Shiwu from Zhenwu Mountain, who is said to be a very handsome man with a very gentle temperament. As for the gentleman of the academy, Zhou Ju, it is even more interesting. The gentlemen take turns. Of course, I will definitely talk about the female status of Nanyue Fan Shanjun, and the function of Wei Shanjun of Beiyue, Rongyi Junyi. The first-line peaks of Xingyang Mountain. In addition to the ordinary climbing Shinto main road, there are also 10 mountaineering kendos, developed by Jianxian himself. They are handed down from generation to generation, and the inheritance is orderly, but 7 of them have already reached the summit. It means that in the history of Xingyang Mountain, there have been 7 Jade Pu Realm Sword Immortals who have witnessed the Tao. The most recent one was the ancestor Xianxia. The other 3 are far from the top of the mountain. Among them are the kendos created by the 3 Yuanying realms in the history of Piao Yunfeng, Pianjifeng and Tongshuifeng. This is the origin of the old 10 peaks of Xingyang Mountain. Therefore, the Zushitang is also called Jianding, which means a continent, mountains and Hanoi. This place is already the pinnacle of kendo. Preaching for longevity, acting against the sky, only fighting for words. Later generations of sword repairs will enter my mountains, and they will spare their lives, climb to the top with swords, step on mountains and rivers, and there will be no others around. These are the ancestral instructions that Zhejiangshan disciples have long been familiar with. Not far from the top of the mountain, the Emperor Zhu led the number 30 and 40 immortal masters, and took a temporary break in a Tingjian pavilion. Originally, he was waiting for the guests from the peaks to come and meet. When the people arrived, the mountain master Zhu Huang led all the ancestors of the sect and the honorable guests, according to the example of the Xingyang mountain ancestor, hike from the Tingjian pavilion together. You need to walk up to about 2 sticks of incense without rushing, climb the top of the sword together, and then walk into the Patriarch Hall to worship the incense. The celebration began, and the news that the guardian enshrined Yuan Jinya among the 5 realms was announced to Yizhou. Never imagined that a rebellious generation who claimed to be Lu Xianying came to the extreme, saying he wanted to ask the sword and demolish the Patriarch Hall. Therefore, the guests of Xingyang Mountain, who are divided into the old 10 peaks and the new 10 peaks, seemed to stop at the same time, not hurrying to Zhu Mountain, just waiting for a good show. The sovereign of the first-line peak, Zhu Huang, Xia Yuncui, Tao Yanba of the Qiulingshan Mountain, and Yan Chu, the master of the peak of the full moon, are already in the Tingjian pavilion. As for the protection of the mountain to worship Yuan Jinya, the ancestor who moved the mountain in the minds of the young disciples of Xingyang Mountain will certainly not be absent. Except for Xingyang Mountain's own ancestor and direct disciple, all sword repairmen outside the mountain, even the distinguished guests, need to take off their swords here. That's why the former Li Tuanjing laughed and said that it was the sword repairer who was willing to go to the hilltop of Xingyang Mountain to pick the sword and enjoy the scenery, and he was not worthy to be a sword repairer. Because there is still half an hour before the celebration, the monks who are already in the frontline peak of the sword pavilion are all old immortals who have been friends with Xingyang Mountain for generations, and they all have an angry face at the untimely provocation of the young sword repairer. Li Ziguda, too rampant. How did Wan Qiong teach such a direct disciple who doesn't know how to do it? The Emperor Bamboo apologized slightly and laughed with many of his friends on the mountain. Let you all read the joke. First, the Yellow River asked the sword at Bailudu, and then Lu Xianying appeared at the gate of Zushan, asking for the sword. It was indeed a bit noisy. The white-clothed old ape walked to the railing alone, squinted at the gate of the foot of the mountain. The little boy was quite witty, knowing that he would give a head with both hands to add to the icing on the cake for his celebration. What a pity. As soon as the people who watched the play blinked their eyes, they found that the good play had ended, which seemed uncomfortable. An old immortal master who has a close relationship with the Dali dynasty first carefully brewed his words, and then smiled. The ignorant child, the frog at the bottom of the well, doesn't need to be bothered by the sovereign, and he just drives away. The Emperor Bamboo shook his head and said, "This person had a small feast with our Xinjiang mountain. Moreover, this person's ancestors also involved an old matter with Xinjiang mountain. I must ask the sword today. Lu Xianyang has been brewing for a long time and it is difficult to be good." Hearing this, the old immortal master immediately understood that he would no longer dare to be a peacemaker between Xinjiang mountain and Longquan sword sect. It was easy for him to be innocent inside and out. Zhongli Yanchu thought for a while and asked in his heart, "Mountain Lord, why don't Feijian pass the letter to Yulin? Let him leave Yujiao Peak immediately and get this sword?" Yulu and Lu Xianyang are about the same age and both are Jindanjian repairers. If Yulin loses, there is no one against Xiefeng Yuanbai. Yanchu has long felt that this person is extremely obstructive. Every time he discusses matters, he will only be half dead and sit at the door as the door god. Yuanbai is best in the mountains with Lu Xianyang. A fight at the door and death at the same time counts, and there will be an extra chair in the Zushitang in the future. However, the patriarch of the Master of Discipline quickly shook his head. He denied the proposal and changed his words. It's better to let Wu Tijing go directly without any muddle and finish with a few swords. Don't delay the auspicious time for the celebration of Yuan worship. Ask the sword on the mountain. Generally there are two situations, either the winner or the loser will be judged and the result will be in an instant. That was the scene when the Yellow River faced Sujia in Fengshua Temple Shangxiantai. Otherwise, the two sides are asking the sword, the strength is similar, and the flying sword does not have the situation of restraining one side, so it is extremely time-consuming, and the sword shines on the world at every turn, all the way to the thousands of miles of mountains and rivers. Although the former is mostly, the latter also often appears. Yanchu was afraid that Lu Xianyang came here just to make a name for himself and he would stop when he wins a game. He also used sinister intentions and deliberately delayed time, saying that he was Wenjian. In fact, he was fighting the wind between the peaks of Xinjiang mountain. After the start of a questioning sword, others can't interrupt it casually. At the moment Xinjiang mountain is like a cloud of distinguished guests. Is it just waiting for the questioning sword to end? Let that Lu Xianyang wander around his hills unscrupulously? The Emperor Bamboo thought for a while. Although he had made a decision, he still had no plans to speak up. He asked for advice. "I think it's okay to lose 1 or 2 games first. In fact, there is nothing wrong with Dragon Gate Sword Repair Golden Core Realm, Yuaning, 1 for each as long as they win the last game. What do you think?" Yanchu frowned and blurted out, "How can you lose the sword today? Under the full view of everyone, maybe even the monks from Beiju Luzhou and Tonggishao are watching our Xinjiang mountain with wide eyes. I'm going to lose. Such a trivial thing, we old guys, can't we be laughed off by the 3 continents? I am Xinjiang mountain, a dignified sect, and the foundation of my life has always been the peak swordsmanship that can reach the sky." As a result, a young man came to the door to ask the sword at the critical moment of the attention of the continent, and I deliberately lost. Your sovereign, Bamboo Sovereign, has his brain flooded. Or do you think Hushan enshrines Yuan Zini's face, not a face? Can outsiders step on the ground casually? Besides, Longquan Jinzong also carried a sword character. God knew if it was Ruanqiong's small-belly chicken sausage. He didn't dare to come, so he deliberately asked his disciple Lu Xianyang to tear down the platform. Xianxia felt that Master Zhu's idea was relatively safe and well-measured in the officialdom. The old ancestor smiled while caressing his beard without a heartfelt word. "Let's save some face for the Saint Ruan." The young man's brains are not clear and he wants to save face. It's inevitable that we don't have the importance of doing things and talking. We can be regarded as half of his elders. Young people are looking for death on their own. We can't really kill him. Yanchu nodded with a smile. Xiaoyuntai said in his heart this time. On the Qiongji Peak, there is a little girl named Lu Yu who seems to have just entered the Dragon Gate realm not long ago. Lu Yu lost and then let Yulu go down the mountain to lead the sword. Both of them lost and there is no big problem. To win the 3rd game, let Zheng Yangshan let the guests watch 1 or 2 more games. Tao Yanba somewhat admired Yuanqui's city house and scheming. First Lu Yu and then Yu Lu were people who practiced swords in Xianxia Mountain Longzhou for many years, so they can be regarded as Lu Xianying's half of the same school. If he wins, it is obvious that Zheng Yangshan swordsmanship is a lot higher than Longquan swordsmanship. If you lose, be discerning. Everyone knows that Xingyang Mountain is a way of hospitality. Let Lu Xianying take this opportunity to reminisce about the past with the same door. Both sides win or lose. In fact, the victory or defeat is in the earlier kendo. Moreover, once Xingyang Mountain asked these two people to go down the mountain to lead the sword, and obviously asked Lu Xianying's sword today, they did not take it seriously. Besides, the first two games were polite. In the third game from Xingyang Mountain, the sword fairy was inadvertently and the shot was a little heavier. It was reasonable even if it was unexpected that the flying sword or the longevity bridge was broken. In order to delay the breakthrough of the Yellow River, Xingyang Shanzu Shitang had a headache when discussing matters. It was the question of the sword on the mountain. In addition to winning and losing, it was more face-to-face. After all, Xingyang Mountain at that time was far from the confidence that it is today, and couldn't afford to lose the slightest face. For example, at that time Xianxia was old and had the highest seniority, and his realm was one level higher than that of the Yellow River, so he should not rush to Fenglei Garden. Zhu Huang was the lord of the mountain. After all, he was an old sword immortal in the same generation as Li Tuanjing. No, so it's almost awkward. In addition, Tao Yanbo and Zhang Li Yanchu really didn't dare to say what their chances were against the Yellow River, which was a sword repairer in the same realm. So in the end, a yuan bai that temporarily changed from the status of a guest to worship was introduced. Today is different from the past. The old swordsmen of the old and new peaks of Xingyang Mountain no longer consciously have no chance of winning, but no one is willing to go down the mountain. It seems that the price has fallen for nothing. What if he wins against a young Jin Dan, who is entangled in a stunned head who does not know the height of the sky? It is a drudgery that is destined to have no face. The 10 young people of Aquarius, headed by Jinwu Mountain and Ma Kushuan, in addition to Xieling, Lu Baqiao, Jiang Yun, Zhou Sui Right, Yu Shiwu, these are all used in the war on the continent. A brilliant young genius. Among the 10 candidates, there is also Wu Tijing, a close disciple of Emperor Zhu Huang, who ranks very high and ranks second. Among the 20 people there is no one named Lu Xianying, let alone Lu Xianying. None of them has the surname Lu. Emperor Bamboo asked, "Is that so?" Several old sword immortals thought this matter was feasible. In the end, Yan Chu squeezed out a talisman sword refined with a unique secret method, and the flying sword passed the letter to Qiang Zifeng. The sword light was like an autumn hong drawing an arc and went straight to Qiang Zifeng. The immortal carries the sword peak, and because there is no guard, Yuan Xinye is enshrined in the Guardian Mountain where he cultivates. After going to the Zhu Mountain, the mountain and water restriction is opened. The white-clothed old ape moved slightly in his heart, spreading his palms, looking at the mountains and rivers, a mountain boundary as far as his heart came. The landscape scene was delicate, but in the end he found no abnormalities. Yuan Xinye only regarded it as a common bird hitting the mountain, or it was the aftermath of some passing monks who accidentally touched the landscape and prohibited them. The Emperor Bamboo noticed the strangeness on the side where the mountain was enshrined, and immediately asked in his heart, "What's the matter?" The old ape in white shook his head and smiled. "It's okay." The Emperor Bamboo smiled and nodded. Indeed, now Xingyang Mountain is not worried about anything serious. There are only many happy events. Qiang Zifeng's ancestor of Kaifeng is a female sword fairy named Ling Qi. She has been in the Golden Core realm for 200 years. She wears 2 swords named Qingshui and Tianfeng. She is also proficient in the transformation of the fairy family, so she has the reputation of, the 2 armpits are breeze, and the feathers are soaring. Among the 3 sword fairy embryos who climbed with Yu Lu at the time, Liu was among them. The young girl was successfully grabbed by Qiongji Peak and became the direct disciple of Ling Qi, the founder of this peak. After Ling Qi received the letter from the lawyer in charge, she rarely smiled. This old lady of the peak owner, with a very old face, a crane-haired cockskin and a fierce look, accumulates great prestige on Qiongji Peak. Lu Yu, the newly acquired protégé, was very kind-minded and kind-eyed and said softly, "Yan Zhonglu has a letter from the front line of the peak. I hope you will go to Zhoushan with your imperial sword and ask Lu Xianying of Longquan sword sect. Now, within a stick of incense, let you do your best. It doesn't matter if you win or lose. It's just official language. Can you take it seriously?" Lu Yu was obviously a little nervous, practicing in the mountains, whether it was in Xianxia Mountain or Qiongji Peak. The real catch and fight and the truthful questioning of swords with people. It was the first time in his life, especially the other party was the direct descendant of Saint Ruan, and you still need to shoot the sword under the gaze of the senior immortal master on the top of the mountain. How can you not be cramped? Leng Qi smiled and said, this discussion should be a reminiscence of the past. Ask the sword every time you try to play better. Just remember one thing, the last few swords, don't lose the prestige of Qiang Zifeng's ancestors. Lu Yu whispered, Master, Longquan Jinzong has known my flying sword and supernatural powers a long time ago. That person is also the legend of Saint Ruan and may take the lead. Her natal flying sword, Dihua. Once the flying sword was sacrificed, it turned thousands of swords into the sky. Leng Qi smiled and said, it doesn't matter, just do as I said, you don't have to think too much. Lu Yu took a deep breath, the long sword was unsheathed with a little tiptoe, stepping on the sword floatingly, and the imperial sword descended to the gate of Yixianfengshan. Zhang Li Yanchu saw the graceful figure of Qiong Jifeng, he used his magical powers and said loudly, Qiong Jifeng Longmen Realm Sword repairs. Lu Yu leads the sword. If this Qiang Zifeng personally passed it on to Yu Jifeng Yulin, he would most likely become a Taoist couple, and then take advantage of the opportunity to occupy the 1,000-year-old ownerless mountain. Yanchu would really not mind teaching her a sword skill, saying the uncertain little girl can still use the Dragon Gate Realm cultivation base to win her Yuan-ing Old Sword Fairy. On Qiang Zifeng's side, it was like Lu Jingchun who had entered the mountain. Standing beside the Taoist priest, he finally landed with a rock in his heart. Lu Zhengchun's Taoist companion is the one with the best aptitude among Leng Qi's dozens of disciples. To be honest, Lu Jingchun was really worried about that Lu who stepped on and became Wan Qiong's successor, played insidious tricks to retaliate against himself and his family. At this moment he is naturally in a good mood. He was born in Liju Dongtian as well as Lu Xianying, but the two are born in a cloud and mud. Lu Jingchun is a child of Lu on Falu Street. How can he think of the guy who was almost killed by himself? Will he transform himself into Jianxiu, or is he a direct descendant of a big figure like Wan Qiong? It's best to be killed. No, it is best to be beaten half to death and break the Xianxia. Then the next time the deceased meet again it will be interesting. She said with a smile, Husband, you have to pay more attention to making money in the future. Lu Jingchun smiled and nodded, I have no shirk and never let the lady worry about the money and let others roll her eyes. At the gate of Yixianfengshan, the long-awaited Lu Xianying opened his eyes and it turned out to be this Lu Yu. The two parties had never met before because before Lu Xianying returned to his hometown, Lu Yu had already left Xianxia Mountain. Lu Yu fell to the ground, collected the sword and returned it to its sheath, and with one hand pinched the sword art to give a gift. There was that strands of sword aura and lingering fingers like green onions. She signed up and said, Qiong Jifeng sword repairs Lu Yu. Lu Xianying sighed and was a little troublesome. Among the three people who went down the mountain in the past years, only the little girl in front of him was actually the progeny of Longquan Jianzong, but she was infatuated with the concubine so she followed to Xingyang Mountain. Lu Xianying smiled and said, Miss Lu just makes moves. Lu Yu nodded and without a word of courtesy he directly sacrificed his life-flying sword Dihua. Within a radius of several tens of meters, all of them seemed to be all overwhelmingly fluttering. Lu Xianying stretched out a hand just gently shaking his wrist, condensing a long sword with the essence of sword aura. Hundreds of flowers swirled all over the sky, instantly covering Lu Xianying's figure. In fact, Lu Xianying was extremely embarrassed at this moment. Qin Pingon had joked before. It is easy to talk about other swords, but you must think carefully about how to deal with Qiang Zifeng's Lu Yu. Lu Yu drew his sword out of its sheath, and his body disappeared in a flash, rushing into the sword formation occupying the right place and people. In the early years of Longquan Sword Sect, several seniors who had climbed earlier had taught her how to sit in the sword formation. Fei, especially Xie Ling, who was not well known at the time and later became famous, taught her a profound transformation of Taoism. Lu Yu obeyed the command of the Master of Genealogy except for the flying sword and the sword formation. She also handed the sword to Lu Xianying with the sword moves handed down by Longquan Sword Sect. A series of sword qi brought out streams of fireflies, slashing towards Lu Xianying among the countless Dihua. Lu Xianying's trajectory is erratic and the sword light is intertwined, But Lu Xianying only uses his sword energy to disperse all the flying swords of Dihua. The long sword in his hand is not a real thing. Cut off. What's going on with this girl, Lu? Are you bullying me to be exhausted from practicing in the mountains? Whether it's a sword formation or a sword move, I've seen it a few times, so I don't need to learn too much. After a while, Lu Yu muttered the sword art silently in his heart. The scattered sword auras that were cut off by Lu Xianying were all connected, like woven into a basket, besieging Lu Xianying, who was only defending but not attacking for some reason, and the sword aura suddenly condensed. Like a rope tightened suddenly. Lu Xianying was too lazy to want to crack the method, so he drew a gourd and drew the same sword tactics as Lu Yu. A sword formation sprang up out of thin air and slammed into each other. The strength was very good, just breaking the formation. Without hurting people, their sword auras were offset cleanly in pairs. And by the way, the flying swords of the fictitious and indeterminate Dihua flowers bloomed more like flowers. Lu Xianying was unwilling to look too much, so he finally took the initiative to gently pass with a sword. Even if the force was deliberately reduced, the sword light was still like an arc moon, bright and dazzling, and went straight to Lu Yu. As a result, she first protected her with hundreds of snow-white scorpion flowers, and was cut to pieces by the sword light. Blocking the front with the sword in his hand, the shoulders on both sides were still rushed by the sword light like water. The robe was rotten, and there were 3 obvious wounds on one arm and shoulder. The blood was blurred and it was terrible. Lu Xianying was more dull and speechless than Lu Yu because he felt tired. It's like fighting with a little slug back then, pretending to fight back and forth. Naturally, it's more tiring than fighting a little with a mouth full of flying swords and crying. As soon as Lu Yu gritted her teeth, she remembered masters saying that she played beautifully within a stick of incense. She bit her head and did not hesitate to exhaust her aura, running that natal flying sword, patches of flowers, lingering around, protecting one person and one sword. Although the number is far lower than before, but each piece of Dihua contains snow-white sword energy, which is quite impressive. Like the wind blowing one side, a large group of Dihua swiftly floats towards the sword repairer who she had had the opportunity to call senior. Lu Xianying sighed, threw out the long sword in his hand, hovered in front of him, centered a sword, and on the left and right sides, hundreds of identical long swords appeared one after another. The strength of the sword was strong and the sword intent was heavy and heavy. Like a rural Mongolian boy who is lazy in reading, he has written countless vertical strokes. But in the eyes of the monk in the mountains, Lu Xianying's sword formation was like a line of iron cavalry, with a mighty sword spirit. That group of really beautiful flying flowers, hitting the sword formation, aroused several feet of snow-white debris, like the tide hitting a cliff. In vain. Lu Yu had to collect the magical powers of the flying sword and condensed it into a snow-white pocket flying sword. He forcibly endured the pain caused by the trembling of the soul, flashed away, and the sword light drew an arc, sweeping towards the back of Lu Xianying's heart. Lu Xianying remained indifferent, but looked at the woman's eyes and found some clues. Alas, this soft-hearted silly girl. You said that it's not good who you like, but you just like that lusty Yulin. Even if you go down the mountain to change the sect where to go to practice sword is not good, but here comes the Xingyang mountain which has long been slanted into the gutter. Lu Xianying moved a step sideways, dodged the snow-white flying sword, knocked the back of his hand lightly, knocked the Dihua into the air, and then stopped, deliberately delaying the questioning sword. Anyone with a discerning eye would know what to do, and layman would not think Qiongji. Feng Jian repaired Lu Yu too vulnerable. The aura of heaven and earth near the gate of the mountain, along with Lu Xianying's thoughts, was like an edict, and suddenly countless long swords were condensed, the high places like heavy rain falling on the world, and the low places like spring grasses blooming densely. Lu Yu was holding a long sword and her face was pale. She stood still, not even daring to take back the flying sword Dihua, because she seemed to be in a forest of swords, and her sword aura intertwined like a forbidden land. At this moment, Lu Yu was pointed at by more than 1,000 overlapping sword tips, and the whole person was like an ice cave. Lu Xianying waved his hand and the sword forest disappeared and smiled. Miss Lu can go back to the mountain and she will practice hard in the future. Don't learn from anyone. Just concentrate on practicing swordsmanship. A certain way can be expected. Lu Yu raised his sword and clasped his fist without saying a word, put away his life-flying sword, lost his soul, and the sword returned to Qiongji Peak. Lu Xianying was actually more aggrieved than Lu Yu, raised his arm high, hooked his palm and signaled to come again. Lu Xianying stepped out one step, walked through the archway gate and began to walk up the steps. If you don't come, I will come. On the side of the sword pavilion at the Yixian Peak, Zhang Lu Yanchu opened his mouth again and smiled. Yujiao Peak Jianxiu Yulin leads the sword. A sword light lit up from the rainy foot peak, swiftly rushing, and went straight to the entrance of Zhou Xian mountain. This young Jianxiu who stood at the gate of the mountain had a long robe with jade belt, a wooden hairpin on his head and a face like a crown jade. He was the golden core sword immortal Yulin, the master of Yujiao Peak. Standing outside the mountain gate intentionally or unintentionally, Yulin smiled at the back figure who was climbing up the stairs and said, Lu Xianying, please turn around and go down the mountain. Lu Xianying turned his head, kept walking and twitched the corner of his mouth. Like to talk in sleep? Then lie down. There was a plop. Yu Lu, the young golden core sword fairy, just tilted his head and fell to the ground. Lu Xianying didn't even look at the guy lying on the ground behind him. As he continued to climb higher, he smiled and said, add one more sentence here. Today, under Yupu, I don't count as taking a sword from me. Whether it's Jindan or Yuaning, you can come as many as you like. The monks of Xinjiang Mountain's peaks were dumb again. I thought it was absurd before. Someone dared to ask Jian Xinjiang Mountain today. This time I felt it was incredible. When this person really asked Jian Xinjiang Mountain, he worked hard to win a sword repairer from the Dragon Gate realm. What kind of feat? But what's the matter with that Yulu who has already peaked? If you say it's the golden core sword immortal, it is the leading sword and then letting the sword, but there are so many ways to let the sword in the world. Falling to the ground and pretending to be dead without a sword? The front line peak stopped at the sword pavilion, and several old sword immortals including the Lord Zhuhuang finally became serious. Even the old ancestor who moved to the mountain couldn't help frowning, and almost went to the foot of the mountain to give a punch, but was dissuaded by the Emperor Bamboo and said that the next sword pickup was not his close disciple Wu of the Mountain Master. Tijing is the pair of Xiefeng Yuanbai who still kept a nascent soul realm. If you accidentally lose again and Zheng Yangshan loses 3 games in a row, let's talk about it again. The so-called reconsideration, it is no longer the personal grudge between Lu Xianying and Zheng Yangshan, but there is no room for maneuver such as killing Lu Xianying first, and then Zheng Yangshan will pay back to Longquan Jianzong, and the Emperor of Bamboo will meet Master Shu Xiayuntai, together with all the sword immortals of the Yuaning stage, ask the sword Xiushan together. Or detain the half-dead Lu Xianying in the mountain, waiting for Wan Qiong to come forward to apologize, and throw Lu Xianying's body toward the foot of the mountain with enough sincerity. But what if Wan Qiong is not sincere enough? Let Longquan Jianzong become the second Fenglei garden. The white-clothed old ape sneered, whether I am Wu Tijing or Yuan Bai, I will go down the mountain later, take one of the legs of the kid and return to the sword pavilion. The Emperor Bamboo smiled and nodded. Yuan Zhufeng has the final say. Xinjiang Mountain just had no reason to deal with Longquan Jianzong. Today Lu Xianying had a big disturbance, which was the best reason. Xiayuntue said something in his heart. The Emperor Bamboo nodded slightly, changed his mind temporarily, and personally sent a letter to Xiagushan with a flying sword. Zhang Lv never announced his identity again, but soon there was a sword immortal with a new face who rushed to Zhu Mountain from the Zhuanlu Peak. It was a woman with a good face and a sword repairer. She was dressed in night clothes and she was neat and clean, carrying a scabbard sword on her back. Qin Pingon left the Yunlu before, sneaked all the way, slightly detoured and quietly appeared at the foot of the back Jianfeng, standing beside a stream, twisting out a golden mountain sign, confirming the restriction and spreading it out with a light fist with the palm of your hand. The mountain broke through the formation in an instant. After stepping into it, the left hand puts the mountain talisman into the sleeve, and the right hand twists a snow mud talisman, and then uses the natal water method. The water mist rises in an instant. Qingshan dissipate, return to peace without any spiritual ripples. After waiting for the parade to quickly pass by, Qin Pingon did not remove the slush talisman, and began to climb slowly, strolling leisurely in the courtyard, just ascending all the way up silently. As for Lu Xianying's Wenjian, Qin Pingon was not worried. Then we'll be busy. Just meet at the front line Fengzhu Shirtang. The guest Qing on the mountain is divided into registered and anonymous, and the Immortal Master is enshrined. In fact, the same is true. The reason is very simple. Many grievances on the mountain require someone to do some dirty work without telling the truth. The shot will not be glorious. Zheyangshan, there is such a behind-the-scenes worship, and the identity is extremely concealed. Most members of the patriarchate who have seats in the frontline peaks are the same, only knowing that there are so many important people in their mountains, but they still don't know who they are. Like Qin Pingon, he didn't have the ability to find out the specific identity of the other party. He only knew that among the old 10 peaks of Xinjiang Mountain, there were at least 2 secret worshippers behind the scenes. One of them was on the Xiaogu Mountain on the Zhuanlu Peak, nicknamed Tainuang. The other is on this back Jianfeng, nicknamed Jilin Old. Qin Pingon didn't feel that there were such people on a mountain. There was nothing wrong with it. He just found out that these 2 shadows are generally invisible, and every time they go down the mountain they will definitely cut the roots. At every turn the door is destroyed, the so-called chickens and dogs do not stay. It is really that literal, beheading on the mountain, no trace, the family under the mountain altogether, leaving no trace of trouble. It's no wonder that the old beast who was once in the small town could have the confidence to speak that bold and dry language. Xinjiang Mountain opened its doors for 2,600 years, with grievances and grievances. Qin Pingon looked around and kept walking, only a little disappointed. The old Jilin, who was used to doing dirty work, didn't even notice himself. Generally speaking, a mountain monk who can do this kind of activity must be proficient in hiding and stealing, being good at detecting subtle movements and protecting his life. Does his mother need Laozi to beat the gongs and drums to climb the mountain before he knows how to welcome guests? My disciple Guizhujiu is not in Haoran, so he can't borrow gongs and drums. Earlier, on a mountain called Pianju Peak, there was a respected old ancestor from a foreign country. He was not too big to watch the excitement, and it didn't matter whether he would be hated by Pianju Peak. The old monk stood on the edge of the mountain cliff, waving his hands to gather clouds. A mirror flower, water and moon fairy method appeared out of thin air, so that the vulgar sun in the peak would not miss the turmoil on the Zhou Mountain in vain. The owner of this peak is one of the 3 female ancestors of Xinjiang Mountain. The other 2 are Qiangzifeng Lingqi, a Jindan Jianxiu, and the dogwood Fengshenwan, who is in charge of the landscape diaries and the mirror flowers. In other words, it's the same female peak owner who always looked down on Qiangzifeng, who would only hide on the mountain to enjoy the blessings. Qiangzifeng would look down on where the bird would not stand. In the end, Tianwan didn't dare to look down on anyone. Smiley face is kind. Because Pianju Peak is the same as Boyun Peak, where sword repairs in the mountains and the downhill experience place are fierce battlefields like Old Dragon City. Most of the people who stayed on this peak of Xinjiang Mountain are the emperors and generals of the dynasty and vassal under the mountain. For example, the monarch of Shihao Kingdom Han Jingling rested here, but the national power was weak, so he arranged a remote small country for the monarch of the small country. In the house, although there are mostly female practitioners on Pianju Peak, the sword repairmen in the mountains are extremely murderous, regardless of men and women. Xinjiang Mountain has arranged this way and handed a lot of mountain giants to Pianjufeng, which has its own profound meaning. The people who were going to take the Fuzhou to the first-line peaks to congratulate each other stopped and stayed in the mountains, or left the house, looking at the landscape painting. They talked for a while. Who? I don't know, I haven't heard the name. It's Lu Xianying of the Longquan sword sect in Dei. He has no reputation. It's normal to have never heard of it. Remember, it's the brother of Xia Ling. I am currently a little disciple of Saint Yuan, but I am definitely not a disciple of Guanmen. The fairy family on the mountain, especially the Zongzitu sect, the most interesting and cheating character is not actually the disciple of a certain suzerain or ancestor, but the closed disciple. This person must be surprised and brilliant. Only then is qualified to let the master take the mountain and close the door for the martial art. Just like the gate of the market under the mountain, the Yaoer at the home of Yinshuren must be loved. The enshrined immortals who had a rough understanding of the Longquan sword sect began to be very interested, and introduced him to the monarchs, ministers and descendants around him. Lu Xianyang, a native of the old Lizhu Dongtian, got the moon near the water tower and was extremely lucky to become the direct disciple of Wan Qiong of the Jianzong sect of Longquan. Lu Xianyang is the first-generation disciple, the one with the lowest generation, and his name was incorporated into the Jinyu of Xianxia Mountain at the latest. Genealogy. It seems that when I was young I traveled across continents and studied for many years at the Tanruchen school in Nampo Suzhou. The reputation is far inferior to those of his senior brothers and sisters, the senior brother Donggu, who is already in the Yuaning realm. Although they are not Jianxiu, they are highly regarded by Wan Qiong, an abbot of the sect, for many years. Jin Danjian repaired Su Xiaoqiao, the earliest Fengshui temple sword repair, committed a big mistake, was removed from the Fengshui temple genealogy, followed Wanqiong's practice, and eventually became one of the descendants. As for Xieling, he is a well-known cultivator genius in the mountains of Yizhou, and he is also the descendant of Xiesher, the heavenly monarch of Luzhou in the north. Among the disciples of Wanqiong, this young man born in Taoyi Alley is the most famous in Beipingzi Mountain and the best practice aptitude. He is regarded as the only candidate for the next lord of Longquan Jianzhong. Someone couldn't help asking, then is Lu Xianying swordsman? What is his realm? As a result, everyone was at a loss. Even the old immortal master who had dealt with Longquan Jianzhong did not know the truth. After all, in the legend of Saint Ruan, the great disciple Donggu was not a sword repairer. Why do you have to ask Xingyang Mountain for the sword? And I made a special trip to choose today. Is this Lu Xianying and Xingyang Mountain have a life and death feud? Still no one knows the inside story. But since Lu Xianying threatened to ask the sword, it was undoubtedly the sword repair. It's just that no matter how high the realm is, how high can it go? After all, Lu Xianying is not one of the 10 young people and 10 candidates in Aquarius. Some old immortal masters who are mature and respectful, think about higher and more long-term, and will not be full of killings. Xingyang Mountain has been planning for a long time. The next clan chose the old Zhuing and he was very particular about it. It was clear that he wanted to compete with the Longquan Jianzhong for the top spot in Beiping's Kendo sect. Some grudges are normal. For example, a young genius like Yu Lu who had been practicing in Xianxia Mountain for many years earlier, came to Xingyang Mountain inexplicably. Anyway, this guy is so bold. What's the use of courage? Being chopped half to death by a sword fairy in the mountain will be a joke on a continent, and will no longer have the face to travel down the mountain in the future. It will also involve the Teacher's Gate and challenge Xingyang Mountain to some grievances on the mountain. Understand, it's a young man, he can't do things with his brain, it's too impulsive and unwise. Is it a personal grievance between young people, arrogant, or? This person is half-talking. Because the remaining words should not be said directly. Or is it Wanqiong's intention? A monk of the upper 5 realms, a sage of the military, his family is the Snow Wind Temple, and the most famous swordsmith in Aquarius. What's more, Wanqiong also has a prominent title dedicated to the chief of Dali. Therefore Wanqiong's every move will be extremely involved. When he reached the gate of Zhoushan Mountain and confronted the Longmen realm woman Jianxiu, Lu Xianying saw that he could only parry. Some people wondered, that's it. Someone joked on the side, is this guy's courage and tone much higher than his realm? So when the first questioning sword led the sword is over, not only the Pianqi Peak but the other peaks all have Fuzhou relaunched to the first line peak, which is probably nothing to see. Then when the Yujiao Peak fell to sleep, the Fuzhou ferry returned to the peaks and continued to watch Jinghua Shuiyue. After all, it would be too much to hover the ferry on the front line of the peak to watch the excitement up close. A young genealogy cultivator said for no reason, "Why do you think we are a little bit Beiju Luzhou?" As soon as this statement came out, it echoed a lot. On the steps of the main road of Zhoushan Mountain, Lu Xianying stopped, turned his head and looked around and smiled. He saw a woman Jianxiu who had never seen a scene before. It looks like a hidden but extremely powerful sword fairy of Yuaning. If you shouldn't show up, it's better to hand the sword far away. Before the two sides asked the sword, the white-clothed old ape laughed and said, Lu Xianying, is it for your deceased ancestor of the Lu family to confess your mistakes with Xingyang Mountain and admit your ancestor? Lu Xianying rubbed his cheeks and ignored it. Because of such things as swearing, Qin Pingon, a bad guy, is better at it. On the back of the sword peak, that really bad blue shirt with his hands folded, looked at the ancient sword that was inserted diagonally on the top of the mountain. A rickety old man climbed slowly and grinned hoarsely. You little baby, this is not a good place to be in a hurry. Qin Pingon turned his head and looked at it. He was a ghost but not a cultivator, and then laughed. No wonder the old man is not a sword fairy but a martial artist of 9 realms. Or the grandchildren who have moved to the mountain to learn boxing for many years. Seniors are right. Feng Shui is not good here and it is not suitable for reincarnation. It will be difficult to be a man in the next life. The nickname of the old man Jilin consecrated squinted his eyes and smiled, whereas the young man, such a talking rare, like wait for your boy's head to be turned off and chat with the old man for a few years. The mountains are lonely. In order to thank you for this young generation, the soul lighting is avoided. Qin Pingon raised a foot, stepped on the hilt of the long sword and said with a smile, We are both night tourists. We ran into ghosts halfway through each. For the sake of being half a fellow man, I will give you one. Feijin spreads a letter to the opportunity to rescue soldiers. The old ghost chuckled. Listen to the tone, it's not a small vengeance with you on Xianxia? Now the young people outside the mountain after a few days of fisting, are they so capable? Qin Pingon tweeted. I'm so daring, I dare to call his name directly, I have to call the ancestor of the mountain. The old ghost rubbed his hands and said, well, I will chat with you in the future. I will definitely relieve my boredom. The last name is very famous. The old man will not kill the nameless ghost. The blue shirt lightly kicked, stepped on the long sword and smiled. It's from a small place, the name is not worth mentioning. The old man stepped forward and handed out a fist, but Qin Pingon reached out his hand and held his fist. The ghost of the Nine-Realm Wufu immediately retreated when he saw that he couldn't make a single blow. Afterwards, the figure was ghostly, surrounded by the blue shirt, handing his fists non-stop, blinking his eyes and making more than 100 punches. The punches can kill the golden core on the mountain. Wearing a blue shirt, he just stood in place with one hand down and blocked the opponent's fists with his right hand. When the last punch was delivered, the old man Jilin took advantage of the momentum and pulled out a talisman from his sleeve. He must stay away from the backsword peak. This uninvited guest, the dog day, turned out to be the end of a young appearance. KO. The back of his neck was cold and he was caught by the man with one hand, fell to the ground and slammed his middle back with one foot, breaking on the spot. The old ghost was forced to disperse his soul and was smashed by a sleeve. Both sides of the questioning box have already separated life and death, but they don't seem to know the name of the other side. Qin Pingon stomped his foot, and the long sword on the ground not far away bounced. When Yufeng traveled far away, he held it in his hand and headed to Xianfeng Zusher Tang. In the end, he followed a path to the top of the sword Dao, and his figure fell on the sword top square. The sword energy around the mountain seemed to be deaf and dumb, and it seemed that he hadn't noticed any outsiders breaking into it. Anyway, Qin Pingon went straight to the ancestor. The door of the hall. A female practitioner from Wamafeng, who was the first to spot the man, was dumbfounded for a while and then asked softly, "Are you?" All the female cultivators saw that in addition to the back sword and the blue shirt, they also carried a sword in their hands at will, turned their heads and smiled, guessed. Sword of Coming Chapter 820. Lu Xianying stopped, turned and stood on the steps, looking at the Zheyangshan Jianxiu who was in charge of the third game of Wenjian. Seeing the traces of the sword light, the woman came from Xiaogu Mountain in the Zhuanlu Peak. She was dressed in night clothes, her face was cold and her momentum was calm. At first glance she was not a fuel-efficient lamp. She had obviously been watching the battle closely at Xiagushan before, especially in the second game. Ilan lost too weirdly. It seemed that once she got close to Lu Xianying, she would fall into a certain formation restriction, so she did not directly defend her sword. Near the gate of Yixianfeng Mountain but stopped between Zhu Mountain and Full Moon Peak, the Yujin was suspended in the air and she and Lu Xianying, who had an extremely mysterious natal flying sword, were just facing away. Anyway, the question of the sword and the distance between sword repairs has never been a real problem. The sky was blowing and the woman was dressed in black, and a long sword at her feet dragged a snow-white stream of fireflies, and the mountains behind her were full of verdant colors, just like a female fairy emerging from a sword in a green landscape painting. Lu Xianying looked at the ugly woman with a sword-like attitude, and felt that he had benefited a lot. Next time I asked the ancestor hall of the sword whose house, I would never listen to Qin Pingan's arrangement anymore. Be stupid. At the gate of the mountain you have to learn from this predecessor, step on the long sword, turn the rainbow, and then hover suddenly. Especially the essence is to appear, you have to choose a place with excellent scenery to become a man in the picture in the eyes of all the spectators. The black-clothed woman pinched the sword art with both hands, and a light golden arc moon appeared on her fingertips. This sword repairman who had lived in Xiaogu Mountain for hundreds of years proved her identity. She came from the full moon peak of Xingyang Mountain. The sword man reported his identity as a gift. Lu Xianying immediately returned the gift and pinched the sword art with one hand. However, he did not report the name of Longquan Jianzong's progeny, but simply introduced his hometown and name, Old Lizhu Dongtian, Lu Xianying in Huaihuang County. She looked calmly, life and death. Lu Xianying smiled and said, "You can win or lose life or death at will. I have long wanted to learn how you climb to the top of the Kendo in Xingyang Mountains. she said, let you do what you want today. Between Yixian Peak and Full Moon Peak, a faint white cloud floated by, but actively bypassed the graceful Yujian figure. Obviously, she had already sacrificed a bodyguard technique to prevent Lu Xianyang's unknown flying sword from being attacked. Zhou Xian then opened the mountain protection formation. The whole line of peaks, except for the top of the sword, clouds and mists rose everywhere. The steps flowed silently like a stream and the water was extremely clear. Lu Xianyang looked down and the whole step was like a layer of woven by a fairy. The cyan lichen under the sun's rays dazzled. This battle was not aimed at Lu Xianyang, but just sheltered the mountains and waters of the first-line peaks, lest he would be brutally questioned by swordsmen on the top of the mountain, and wantonly shatter the beautiful scenery in the mountains. An unknown woman's sword repair suddenly disappeared. At the same time, a golden long sword appeared out of thin air at the height of the first-line peak. It was the treasure of Zhinshan that removed the old peak somewhere in Xingyang Mountain. Then the sword body twisted into several arcs, intertwined with electricity and light, like a golden whip left by the of thunder, and there was thunder roaring in the sky. In an instant, this unusual ancient sword quickly dragged out several the golden brilliance of 100 feet long stretched out an arc of a month and a half from high altitude, and hit the tall man standing on the steps of the first line with a whip. Lu Xianyang pinched the sword art with one hand, a golden light appeared on the tips of his fingers, put his fingers together and gently drew a circle, a golden light stretched out, and a circular line appeared beside Lu Xianyang. Lu Xianyang snapped his fingers again. A circle, the line becomes a golden sphere that enveloped Lu Xianyang, like a big day being detained by refining and detention, became pocket-sized and cute, as if being placed on a step by an immortal. The golden light was thick like water, shining bright, and it seemed to be soaring. Jianxiu Lu Xianyang standing in the center, his sleeves fluttering. With a whip to the ground from the mountain climbing shrine to the mountain gate archway, there was a cyan lichen that quickly condensed from the formation of ripples, layered on top of each other, and was eventually cut into a crack several feet deep by the arc of lightning. The mountain top halfway down the mountainside of the first-line peak, from the thunder whip as thick as the mouth of a well, scattered like hundreds of golden thunder and lightning snakes, running non-stop. If it were not for the ancestral mountain formation to protect the roots of the mountains and water transport, just this whip fell. Even if the mountain climbing shrine was destroyed, the archway building would be divided into two halves by a whip. It's just that this powerful lightning whip can't break through the golden circle of Lu Xianyang alone. At the foot of the first line of peaks, there are countless lightning whips intertwined, woven into a net as if a figure is hidden. Thor in the sea of clouds blasted the world with a whip. The monks watching the battle from all peaks, all the genealogical monks who weren't earth immortals, held their breath and were thrilling. The spiritual energy of the heaven and the earth moved slightly, and the woman showed a misty figure and raised a crystal-clear left hand. The bones and muscles meridians of the gods on the mountain, known as the golden branches and jade leaves, are delicate. She had a virtual grip on her right hand and she slowly twitched. She frowned slightly. The ghost cultivator seemed to be enduring the trembling pain, and pulled out a long emerald green sword from the palm of her left hand, like a faint green river refined. It is inscribed with the words ancient seal and sword. The blade is like water swaying slightly. Lu Xianyang glanced at the vision of the woman pulling her sword out of the sheath in the distance. From the Yixian Peak to the top of the Full Moon Peak, he tilted and pulled out a sharp straight line without warning. The sword light was straight and instantly penetrated the figure of the woman. The castration of the sword light was still incomparable, and the Full Moon Peak was directly moved. A cliff was cut through and a long line of sword light went to the sky, which lasted for a long time. The figure of the female ghost spread out and turned into a cloud of wind miasma, but the heart was pierced by the sword light, a fist-sized vortex of sword energy. The ghost with a knife, the head, torso and limbs, have all been separated by themselves, and then the wisps of sword energy in her body are broken, and they barely maintain a human form. The golden long sword that was controlled by her heart was flying in the air without stopping, with golden thunder and lightning, and it was still frantically whipping the mountain road at the foot of the peak. Every time the long whip hit the ground, it was a thunderous vibration. A huge mountain of Xingyang Shanzu like a bonsai landscape, suddenly a golden flower with a distinct vein blooms. She slashed it out in a distance, and there was no bright light blooming, only a silky gray appeared between the sky and the earth. Lu Xianying still stood in place, motionless, wiped his fingers horizontally and said softly, Shilua Guixu. In the air between Guiwu Jianxiu and Lu Xianying, a long river of nothingness appeared out of thin air, and the gray line fell into it. After that, the sword light burst like a flood, just rolling down one by one in the returning ruins, and finally even the golden thunder lights were all in the bag. It seems that there is a huge difference between the two sides of the sword. From the beginning to the end, Lu Xianying did not use the swordsmanship he learned from Longquan Jianzong. When asked about Jianxingyang Mountain, he never said hello to the Iron Master Wan. Anyway, as long as Wan Qiong didn't stop him, Lu Xianying would just agree. Lu Xianying glanced at the top of his head. Clouds gathered in all directions, and it showed an unusual black color. As long as he was not blind, he knew that it was the woman's sword repair method. Lu Xianying knew that this sword skill was the famous mastery of the Yunfeng cloud. At noon, under the sun's rays, it penetrated the curtain of black clouds, as if there were 8 sword lights falling from the sky, and the tip of the sword pointed directly at Lu Xianying. Lu Xianying's mind moved slightly, and 8 long rivers of sword energy emerged in the 8 directions surrounding the first line of peaks. In the distance, several long swords were densely clustered together in turbulent rivers, and the sword energy was strong, bypassing the mountain behind the first line of peaks. Pulling several fronts, like a group of Qingqi, rushing to the battlefields where the golden light passed through the dark clouds. In the end, in midair, the mighty sword formation river, and the sword falling in the cloud controlled by the woman Yuanying, diametrically opposed, like an iron cavalry colliding against the formation on the battlefield. After all, he is a serious Confucian disciple, and Lu Xianying still knows how to use a few sword poems by those sages and writers. The ghost repair woman did not even look at the sword formation through the clouds. Her figure suddenly scattered into 7 rainbow lights. The rainbow lights spread out like arrows, and finally became 8 illusory sword holders, whose whole body was intertwined with white light. Success, 1 sword was handed out, and the sword light turned into a mysterious white horse. On the way forward, they suddenly appeared, disappeared, and their whereabouts were uncertain. They all rushed towards the first line peak Lu Xianying. It's that Pian Xiaofeng's swordsmanship at the bottom of the box. Time is like an arrow and Baiju flies. The transformation technique of the Qi practitioner has never been very popular. Even the side door is not counted. The most inferior is the bird, the beast, or the Xinjiao Wanhe and the like. If it can show the dragon as big as a mountain phase or some fierce anomalous ancient alien species, and can have 1 or 2 corresponding natal supernatural powers, is considered superior. The magical art of Pian Kaifeng is quite impressive. It can make Taoist priests and the likes of earth immortals roughly imitate the legendary magical creature Baiju jumping in time and flowing water, and then carry a ray of sword intent. Used to kill the enemy. Lu Xianying condensed a long sword with his sword aura, swinging the sword at will for a few times, and smashed several white horses with treacherous trajectories into the air. In addition, a white horse that was as bright as the moon suddenly sank and escaped the sword light. The horseshoe stepped on the ground lightly, and in an instant he came to the back of the steps of Yixianfeng. Lu Xianying didn't turn his head but back with a sword. The white horse rushing down the steps collapsed like porcelain and finally had 4 heads. Time Baiju crashed into Lu Xianying's golden sword formation, and the snow-white brilliance exploded with the golden sunlight. The female sword repairer had been waiting for this moment, and finally sacrificed her natal flying sword. The entire moon peak in Earth realm, the heaven and earth aura was drawn away, and it was instantly dark as if the day turned into the night. The night was heavy. On the side of the first line peak, the formation lichen changed from light green to dark green. Over the full moon peak, a bright round moon appeared, sinking into the blue sea with lightning speed. The place where the moon fell in the world was where Lu Xianying stood. Lu Xianying still didn't move, but he looked strange. Questioning the sword this time, it's almost okay if you postpone it, it's meaningless. The bright moon was still falling into the sea without any stagnation, but for a moment, the ghost of the woman with swordsmanship still lost his mind, like falling into the clouds, many painted or painted life scrolls, one by one. This kind of unreasonable strangeness, apart from asking both sides of the sword, even the gods of the immortal realm like Qizhen have been watching the battle with the supernatural powers of the mountains and rivers, without missing any subtle details and still unaware. And this behind-the-scenes enshrined at this moment can actually be regarded as half a Yupu realm Yuanying ghost. She is not even aware of it, she is traveling through her own life pictures. This is the terrible thing about Lu Xianying's natal flying sword. Swords out of dreams, killing at will. No one can escape a sound sleep, and everyone's sleep is a long river. And every time Lu Xianying falls asleep, it is a long journey upstream. The key is that he has seen anyone and then he can go to that person's growth river at will. So whoever fights with Lu Xianying in the same situation is an extremely dangerous situation. Ning Yao Fei Ran Shou Qin Qin Pingan. It is possible that only these swordsmen with extremely tough swordsmanship can have the power to fight back in the same state, each with magical powers and a slight chance of winning. Because Lu Xianying's only flaw in Wenjian's dream is that Lu Xianying meets people in his dream. It is Lu Xianying's going down the river, but it is the time of others. That is to say, Ning Yao and Firen sword repairs, either the talent is invincible or the sword heart is extremely stable or even both, so it is very likely that in the first moment, you realize that something is wrong, like a person in a trance in a dream, but vaguely knows it and dreams. If at that moment the person who was asked about the sword in the dream had an unusually clear and transparent sword heart, with this sword breaking through a dream, he would be able to avoid Lu Xianying's sharper sword. This is the reason why Lu Xianying is willing to keep dragging Xingyang Mountain to Wenjian. As long as he hasn't entered the Yupu realm, Laozi is not invincible. Otherwise Qin Pingan can really stop him with painful words. Lu Xianying has always been the only one who taught Qin Pingan to do things. Lu Xianying on the steps of Yixianfeng without a sword, went to block the moon falling into the sea. For the first time he stepped back and used the mountains and rivers to shrink the mountains and rivers. After going halfway up the mountain, the moon fell to the ground and went up the steps, crushing all the way, following Lu Xianying's figure. Lu Xianying had no choice but to no longer hide his realm. Suddenly he showed a figure of 100 feet tall, raised his sleeves, and used the sleeves of the Yupu realm monks to earn that round of climbing for the next month. In the sleeves, the big sleeves swelled and the tearing and cracking of the silk cloth sounded endlessly. The bright moon was like a rolling ball, bumping everywhere. Lu Xianying stretched out his fingers and pressed the sleeves. The bright moon in the sleeves gradually settled down, finally because of the loss of the female ghost. Controlled by the mind, it seemed like water without a source. It smashed in the sleeves. In the small world there were countless snowy white moonlights. The moonlight slightly oozes out of the sleeves. The sun and the moon are long in the pot of the fairy master on the mountain. As for the other Lu Xianying, she accompanied the woman ghost and walked in a long river of time, and the two went down the river together looking over her life. A full moon peak female sword cultivator, her 500 to 600 years of cultivating career seems to be a long time, but in fact it was only in the moment of their respective minds, and if it hadn't been for Lu Xianying's heart to move, she would change her mind. Perceiving the situation of the dream, Lu Xianying handed out a sword in the dream. She will be at least consumed by a sword for 100 years of Taoism, and will be shattered many souls. Besides, she is inherently rotten and seems to be just suffering. How many swords can the supporting soul stand Lu Xianying's dream? Lu Xianying sighed, stopped, and called out her name softly. The long river of time came to a halt. The woman ghost who wandered and looked back on her entire life suddenly waked up, and looked around, only to realize that she was not a new dragon. The female cultivator in the realm, there was no junior girl who was still looking forward to the future together, let alone the full moon peak. She wanted to operate her natal flying sword, but found that the Qinza, who depended on her master for life, was still in her natal acupuncture point. But her mind moved slightly. No matter how she pulled it, she seemed to be blocked by a mountain. The gate, Feijin won't get out of the gate to kill the enemy. Lu Xianying glanced at Tianwei, and said with a smile, "There is still some time left. I will show you the real mountain scenery." The reason for the exception is that this woman ghost may be a certain future Lu Yu from Xingyang Mountain. In the next moment she only felt the changes in the surroundings, and then her heartstrings tightened and she was choking out of breath. Just for an instant, a ghost whose Jinshin was still in the nascent soul stage at any rate collapsed on the spot. In the endless battlefield, countless golden gods are high in the sky, countless monster races are on the ground, fighting between the sky and the earth. Corpses are everywhere like mountains stretching. And the place where she and Lu Xianying stood was actually on the tip of a big demon holding a magic knife. And a big demon whose height did not reach thousands of feet, stepped on the mountain with one foot, provoked with the knife in his probing arm with scarlet eyes. The eyes are hot, it looks up at the sky, full of fighting spirit. Lu Xianying asked indifferently, "Situ Weining, because you are not like Zhengyangshan Jianxiu, I brought you here. Do you have anything else you want to say in the end?" As far as they could see, the battle was fierce. It's just that Lu Xianying is not surprised, but the ghost sword repair named Situ Weining is thrilling. Just seeing the scenery, he is already dizzy and Dao heart is lost. There is a pair of colored armored gods with golden eyes, standing on the earth, spreading his palms to draw a bright galaxy from the sky, holding it as a long whip, whipping the earth high. The earth is fragmented and ravines are vertical and horizontal. There was a huge who looked like a woman. When she landed on the ground, tens of thousands of golden lightning flashed to the ground instantly, as if the world bordered the earth. There was the small body of the great demon who pulled the gods with one hand. After tearing it apart, he discarded half of it and put the remaining half in his mouth, chewing it, but was pierced by a golden halberd that fell from the sky. In the chest, it actually leaned forward with a grinning smile, tearing open its body, and then holding the halberd backhand, stomping heavily on the ground and throwing it back to a golden in the sky. Before the latter caught it, dozens of them were located. The gods in the lower part were passed by. After the gods of the halberd master took over, they didn't even look at the corpses of the gods hanging on the halberds. They just shook their wrists slightly to shake the string of candy gourds on the weapons in their hands. She trembled. "This is your natal flying sword?" Lu Xianying twitched the corners of his mouth. "Otherwise?" A jade pure realm fell out of thin air and I happened to be picked up by Lu Xianying. She was dull and speechless and was silent for a long time. In the end she knew that she was going to die, but she laughed instead. "This is the end, unexpected joy." Lu Xianying knelt down and said, "I finally understand the meaning of those words. Yesterday I was in the Yunlu there and I lay in a wicker chair while drinking and chatting with my friends. Anyway, I was idle. The two best friends talked about everything. Finally, drinking slightly, Qin Pingon smiled and looked towards the sky and said something to his heart. He said that interesting things and meaningful things are not easy to do. Interesting and difficult things, if done, may not have any meaning. But a meaningful thing, if done, must be very interesting. The several groups of celestial masters on the full moon peak could even clearly feel the aftermath of the tremor of the big earthquake on the Yixian peak. As for the two places of Buyun Peak and Shuilong Peak, two groups of mountain gods and water gods from all over the continent met. They are more sensitive to the transportation of mountains and waters. Compared with ordinary monks, it is more difficult to determine the consequences of a questioning sword. Changed the landform for a long time. Jiang Yun, who came out of the branch of the Jiang family in Yunlin, and Fu Nanhua, the old dragon city, were both foreigners who went to the Lizhu cave to look for opportunities. In addition, the two sides had met on the battlefield of Dadu. They were half acquaintances. Standing side by side for a while, looking at the magnificent picture of the sword in front of him, Fu Nanhua asked softly, "Both of them are Yuan Ying sword fairy?" Jiang Yun nodded, "Undoubtedly. Maybe Lu Xianying is more than that." However, Jiang Yun's interest is not in the questioning sword, but the Zhoushan formation of Xingyang Mountain, which is similar to a soldier with a rank of at least half a fairy. In order to protect the first-line peak during the questioning of the sword on both sides, know as for being devastated by sword light scattered and bombarded with spells, it would be fun to wait until the end of the war. Afterwards, guests from all peaks climbed and watched, and there were potholes everywhere, especially the Xianxia mansion halfway down the mountainside. I never thought that the most boring mountain ceremony could become so interesting. Sure enough, don't mess with the young generation who walked out of Lizhu Dongtian. Not to mention Song Jisun Nipping Lane, who is already the king of the Dali domain, Ma Kushuan from Xinghua Lane, and Xia Ling from Taoya Lane. In the past few years he was traveling alone, killing demons and eliminating demons and magical skills. There have been endless and extremely decisive. There are still two pure martial artists from the Yang family pharmacy. They also had a turmoil on the mountain at an ancient battlefield site. As for Zhao Yao on Fulu Street, he returned to his hometown to serve as a Dali official. Dealing with disputes on the mountain is even more cruel. I never thought there would be another Lu Xianying today. Fu Nanhua's bloated wife sat in the viewing pavilion with Wei Liang, and Jiang Xing asked, "When will Lu Xianying reach the top of the sword all the way?" Wei Liang smiled heartily, "Little Ginger, what anxious. I can't eat hot tofu in a hurry, please wait patiently. That Lu Xianying has a lot of strength. Jiang Xing's eyes lit up. Is there still hot tofu? Wei Liang nodded and said, maybe it will be very hot and even feel hot even after serving a bowl. Jiang Xing shook his head and said, it's impossible. Even if the surname Lu is a sword fairy in the Yupu realm, it's a fluke that he can walk to the top of the sword. Regarding the background of Xingyang Mountain, Yunlin Jiang's side is naturally clear, and she is the most indulgent of Jiang's ancestors, plus the fact that she was forced to marry Lao Longqing when she was wronged. The ancestor has always felt guilty. Every time she goes back to her family's home, the heavy-duty Jiang family owner will make time to accompany Jiang Xing to relax. Wei Liang laughed and said, there are only two kinds of immortal houses in the world, mountain tops and scattered sands. Even if it is a wealthy family on the mountain, as long as it reaches a certain critical point, it will instantly become disintegrated. The former is Tongyi's Hao Yugui. Zhou, Taiping Mountain, Beiping Zifengxue Temple, Zhenwu Mountain. As for the latter, there are more, but some are hidden shallowly, some hidden deeply. Xingyang Mountain belongs to the latter of the latter. If only Lu Xianying asks the sword today, it is true that he will not reach that critical point. Just like Xiao Jiang said, he will stop at the top of the first-line peak sword. At most he will be left by Xingyang Mountain or by Longquan sword sect. Someone brought down the mountain and counted it as a post-dinner talk on Beipingzi Mountain. Having said that, Wei Liang looked at the young sword repairman standing on the steps of the first-line peak. Of course, Lu Xianying is already very powerful. Only two people can do it before the Yupu realm sword fairy, who is less than 50 years old. Jiang Xing was shocked when he heard this. Lu Xianying is a sword fairy in the Yupu realm? It was just more shocking to the world, or what Wei Liang called the first two. She couldn't help but ask, two? Isn't it only the Fengxue Temple Wei and Jin dynasty? Wei Liang smiled and said, it seems that your ancestor of the Jiang family still doesn't care enough about young Ginger. Jiang Xing curiously asked, who is it? Where is it now? How famous is such a young sword fairy? Wei Liang sold it off. It's far in the sky right in front of you, and now he's somewhere in the mountains of Zhufeng. This guy, he brought a big bowl of hot tofu and went to be a guest. As a result, the owner had to eat it. Eating, if you are not careful, you will not only burn your mouth but also burn your liver and intestines. Jiang Xing said suddenly, I was surprised before why Uncle Wei was willing to rush to Xingyang Mountain from his busy schedule to waste time in vain. Wei Liang nodded, squinted and said with emotion, I have to come because I need to learn the method of dismantling things to the best of their ability with a young man. Wei Liang, the grandfather, son and grandson, are actually the same person. A Buddhist monk who has been the chief governor of the Qinghuan country from generation to generation, was silent for a moment, and suddenly laughed at himself and said, I am really angry. That kid is so simple. Well, now I can hold my nose and ask him humbly about this knowledge. On the side of the Yixian Peak Dingjian Pavilion, the sovereign Zhu Huang saw the ghost of the woman who had done a great job in the mountain gate. His eyes were full of pity and guilt, pitying her for being a woman but having a pitiful life experience. Pujing today still needs her to leave Xiagushan to lead the sword with Lu Xianying. Xia Yuanqui's expression is complicated, and here is the inside story of a long dusty sect. Even Tao Yanbo and Yan Chu, such a high-powered Zheyangshan old man, are just some private guesses, and no one will easily mention it. I only know that woman. There is a woman in the Yuanying realm, Guixiu, who is incognito, took over the position of Tainyuang. After seeing her, the white-clothed old ape looked displeased and said to several old sword immortals, her fate is not her life alone, it is related to the great formation of Zushan. Once her soul is scattered, it will damage the hub of the big formation from the root, and the loss of that immortal money will not be said. Why should the sect master ruin a mountain of qi so much? Who will make up for it afterwards? The face of Xia Yuncui, who had always been deep in the city mansion, was a little angry and said, Yuan Zhuang's words are a bit hurtful. This behind-the-scenes consecration, according to the genealogy records that has long since passed away, the female Yuan Ing Jianxiu, secretly serves as the oiling father of Xingyang Mountain. The sesame oil added in the implied meaning is the ancestor worship lamp of Yixian Feng Zushitang, which can add incense to the top of a mountain. She came from Full Moon Peak and was once one of Xia Yuanqui's most proud successors. She and the woman who was killed by Li Tuanjing personally and then exposed her bones to Fenglei Garden Square were sisters. Both of them had the opportunity to take over as the peak master from Xia Yuntei, the master who was interested in practicing swordsmanship, to help with general affairs and even hoped to become the mountain master. You must know that among the peaks of Xinjiang Mountain, the current Lord Zhu Huang, although he has excellent sword training qualifications, he is still not the best swordsman. It's just that their roads are bumpy, one is dead and the other is resentful, and they choose to embark on a decapitated road, becoming the inhuman and ghost-like appearance they are now. Because they, or the entire Xinjiang Mountain, have encountered the Fenglai Garden Jianxiu Li Tuanjing, who hit the opposite. Emperor Bamboo persuaded, Uncle Xia Yuan Zhufeng has never spoken to things or to people. In the past dynasties, men and women can be both men and women. They must be sword repairers. Once they hold this position, they are equal to a half-dead person, because not only will they be removed from the patriarch hall's genealogy, they will be cancelled, and then they will find a random cause such as failure of retreat and disbandment of soldiers. And every time he showed up to hand the sword and did what he was doing, it was often extremely dangerous, and every time it was a desperate move. Before Xia Yuansui and Zhu Huang entered the Yupu realm respectively, after she became a ghost, she was actually the most powerful sword repairman in Xinjiang Mountain. Her existence was to deal with Li Tuanjing's very possible question of Jianjing Yangshan so as not to climb Li Tuanjing all the way, like entering the land of no one. Xinjiang Mountain naturally did not dare to expect her to be able to cut Li Tuanjing with a sword. It was a bit similar to Yuan Bai and Wang's questioning swords. These methods were just that when the peaks were weak, the Shan men had no choice but to protect themselves. Active. The old ape in white sneered. It naturally knew what calculations Xia Yuansui and the Emperor Zhu had made. The two of them had long considered that the ghost lady was an eye-catcher. The former Xinjiang Mountain could not be without her. She had to guard against the unrivaled Li Tuanjing, who was alive. Li Tuanjing dismantled the entire patriarch hall alone and interrupted those mountain-climbing kendos. But now she has become a stain on the old almanac. It is best to leave it to an outsider to erase it. Xinjiang Mountain, there is no shortage of her, half of the sword fairy of the Jade Pure realm. Xia Yunhui was prepared to give up a shameless progeny based on this merit, so that when he discusses matters in the patriarch hall in the future, he would exchange for a sword fairy embryo. As for the sovereign Zhu Huang, don't look at his previous regrets and guilt. Actually, in the entire Xinjiang Mountain, the one who wanted her to die cleanly and thoroughly was the Bamboo Emperor, who changed from Yuan Ying to Yu Pu and from the Mountain Lord to the Sovereign. However, the white-clothed old ape knew everything, but didn't feel that there was anything wrong. The Emperor Bamboo was not so cruel. How could he be the Sovereign? Xia Yuntui didn't calculate this way. How could Full Moon Peak continue to grow and occupy the most seats in the lower Zongzishi Hall? The fate-flying sword of that woman ghost is named Chenza, and has a very high rank. Once sacrificed, it creates an impossible place within a radius of tens of miles. Fijian's magical powers that shed the spirit of heaven and earth and fish are just one of them. In addition, she is good at unique swordsmanship. She fights with others with swords and walks the way of burning jade and stone. In addition, by virtue of flying sword, she can eat food and grain, which is equal to 1. Yuan Ying Jianxiu, in the condition of Yangsha worry-free, still did not hesitate to turn into a ghost, abandoning the outer body of the Yangshan body and the entire skin, and borrowed half of the realm of the Yupu realm. And her soul has long been with Xinjiang. The mountain and mountain protection formation is integrated, and you cannot leave the mountain for too long, otherwise the soul will decay extremely quickly. Therefore, unlike the old man who planted the forest on the back of the sword peak, every time you go down the mountain you can sway like traveling through the mountains and rivers. You only need to cut the grass and remove the roots. Yes, she can't, so every time she descends secretly she is beheaded. The man who continues the incense for the ancestor hall, and the old man who planted the roots of the sword forest in Xinjiang Mountain, these two veritable behind-the-scenes worships, a Yuanying sword immortal and a master of the 9 realms, have a clear division of labor, and occasionally go down the mountain to cooperate in killing people. The coordination is seamless, leaving no clues. The Emperor Bamboo suddenly said in his heart, "Today there have been enough accidents, there must be no more accidents." So the next sword master Xia junior brother Tao Zhongli, it's hard work. The Emperor Bamboo added another sentence, "I will notify Degushan, so I will add Wu Tijing's natal flying sword." Xia Yunhui nodded. The other 2 gods of wealth and Master Zhonglu, although hesitated, they still agreed to this matter. As long as they did it without knowing it, Lu Xianying would only die without knowing how the peaks watched the battle. The same can only be regarded as Lu Xianying being beheaded by a female ghost with a sword, without knowing the mystery. Among the sword repairs, Emperor Zhu Huang, Xiayuntai Tao Yanbao, and Yan Chu are 2 jade and 2 yuan infants. In addition to that ghost repair, it can usually be regarded as half a jade pu realm. After fighting for life, it can be regarded as a murderous jade pu real sword fairy. What's more, Xinjiang Mountain is in addition to Jianxiu, and there is also a mountain guarding Yuanjinye, which is already Yupu. And on the back of Jianfeng, there is also a behind-the-scenes worship of the old man Jilin, an old ghost who hangs his life with a secret technique, and is the great master of the 9 realms. In this way, if the peaks follow the ancestral mountain and open the mountain protection formation together, plus the sword top, killing an immortal or even a fairyland sword repair, it is not a problem, more than enough. But this kind of great sword immortal, even if you add the neighbors in the north and south, the whole Sanzhou mountains and rivers by Chong Wei Jin Jiangshangzhen Weiying, who else is there? Besides, the sword immortal in the fairyland or the great monk in the ascended realm, who dares to come here in Aquarius now? Is the imitation by Yujing above Dadu in the middle of the real dead thing? Therefore the time, the place and the people are harmonious, all in Xinjiang Mountain. On the cliff of Daegu Mountain on Zhuanlu Peak, a young man in black clothes carrying a sword glanced at a lonely woman on the side of Xiaogu Mountain not far away. His eyes were cold, and after retracting his gaze, a nearby piece of dead wood ran out of the cliff. He walked up, and after stomping off the dead wood with 1 foot, his figure was light and he jumped into the air with a long sword behind his clam. Wu Tijing walked with his sword. This young swordsman, who was regarded as the best swordsman in Xinjiang Mountain for thousands of years, did not hang a saber around his waist, only the section from the sword to the hilt. It seems that there was a long sword, but the blade was lost. While floating with the sword, Wu Tijing slowly breathed out, and his sleeves were hunting. The genus of swordsmanship in the mountains of my generation, purely the way of hand-to-hand combat, the inner real spirit. The body is like a bird, the spirit of the spirit. The sword spirit is like water overflowing the river. The sword spirit is like a hibiscus out of the water. The kendo is vast and lofty like the stars spinning. Lu Xianying and the woman's ghost questioned the sword with great momentum and visions, and there were chaotic ripples of sword energy remnants everywhere. And he led the nose of an ancestral mountain formation, so Qin Pingon left the back of the sword peak and hid his body. Following a kendo but being a little careful, he successfully climbed to the top of the sword with the ancient sword he picked up. After being asked by the female cultivators on the top of the mountain who they were, Qin Pingon smiled and said that he was a guest, and suddenly stopped outside the threshold of the first-line Fengzhu Master Hall, turned his head to look at the female cultivators of Wamafeng, one by one, and then seemed to say to himself, muttered to himself, "Since I have already seen through, can you let Lu Kai flow to Xiefeng or travel far to Lu Tai, and postpone asking me about the sword? There will be more opportunities in the future. Yuzozi, after all the things of heaven, why rush for a while, such as waiting for me to go to Wuxia world? Or after traveling to Qingming world?" To Xiefeng, Yuanbai's maidservant was shining brightly with her eyes, and then she quickly lowered her head, seeming to be a little bit hesitant. Even Yuanbai didn't notice this subtle movement of her. A Qiang female cultivator in the square glanced at the sword fairy in green shirt. The corner of her mouth curled up, and then she nodded lightly as if she had agreed to the matter. The female cultivator returned to her normal expression in the next moment. This Hua Mu Fong female sister actually didn't realize it. And beside Yuanbai, the handmaid Lu Kai from Ai Aizhou Tianjing Fudi disappeared without warning, and she left to face Xiefeng without even having time to speak with Yuanbai. At the side of Daoist company, the sword light flashed like by Yujing, but he withdrew soon. It seems that a Yin god who is a sword repairer in the Jade Pure realm is traveling far away, and it is not worth the sword. Before coming to Xinjiang Mountain, Qin Pingon had gone to Dadu in the middle of the country. He didn't rely on any identity to board the imitation by Yujing, but with the names of 2 monks from other continents. Then Qin Pingon saw a borderless man with a vague figure and a vague appearance. At that time Qin Pingon opened the door and said, "You'll find Bai Chong or Zhou Zi. You will be responsible for the sword according to the rules. But I can't guarantee that I can find it. Because in accordance with Daoist rule that only applies to mountain tops, all Biezhou Fairyland sword repair and ascendant boundary grand monks did not take the initiative to hand out a communication certificate with the Dali court, and set foot on the territory of Aquarius Island without authorization. Once discovered, they must ask about the sword. But that customs certificate only needs to be sent to the imitation by Yujing, and there is no need to say hello to Dolly Capital or the companion. This is actually another weird thing. The borderless person who didn't know his identity nodded and smiled. Within the rules it should be. The Tianwan of Xingyang Senju Peak once sent a letter from Feijian to his husband, by Chang'e Zhou Zijiao. In short, Cui Dongshan has 10% certainty that one of them must be hiding in the dark, waiting for an opportunity. In fact, Qin Pingon was already on the way to imitate Bai Yujing. Qin Pingon was standing on the top of the sword with a wide view at the moment, turning his head to catch a glimpse of the sword light on the side of Xiefeng, and did not look back for a long time. If he was just reading the espionage about Xingyang Mountain, he would definitely not have too many guesses about the maid named Lu Kai, next to Yuan Bai. But when it comes to Jiu Minetawan, especially the case that Qin Pingon has been wary of, Qin Pingon will never take it lightly. Until this moment, the real body of Zhou Zi in Aquarius Island hadn't gone away. Qin Pingon could finally breathe a sigh of relief. For no reason, he remembered two Buddhist sayings that the grass bandit was defeated and the thieves tried to pull the bow. Well, this time Wenjian Zhengyangshan finally no more worries. As for the white clothes, as long as you dare to come to Beipingzu to pass the sword insidiously, don't leave, go to Luopa Mountain as a guest. However, I believe that with Bai Chang's temperament, even if he travels secretly across continents, he has realized that the movement of Bai Yujing is destined to return home quietly, but it is more likely that this ambitious northern sword fairy is still only will choose to stand by and watch the play from a distance. A female officer of Wamafeng hurried forward, boldly stretched out her hand to stop at the door and cautiously discouraged. This sword fairy Jianding Zushitang is our first forbidden place. We can't go. Breaking in without permission is to cause trouble. Big trouble. Qin Pingon smiled and said, there will be no trouble. Your ancestor who moved to the mountain and I are old friends. The reason why I have achieved today is largely thanks to him. If you don't, rest assured, Feijian spread the letter to the Emperor of Bamboo. I just have something to do. I want to have a good chat with him. There are many people at Tingjian Pavilion and it's not suitable to talk about business. There will be Miss Lau who will spread the letter, so I will pick my chair first. By the way, my name is Qin Pingon and I come from Luopa Mountain, and I want to remind you that the Lord, let him come to Jianding by himself. While the female officer was hesitant, I never thought that the man in the blue shirt and back the sword, his figure disappeared in a flash. He had already crossed the threshold and walked in the patriarch hall with her arm hanging in the air. She put her hands away, flushed with anxiety, almost burst into tears, made such a big omission under her eyelids, and returned to Qiangzifeng afterwards, so she could not be scolded to death by her ancestor. She stamped her foot and had to turning around. He hurried to Feijian's secret letter to the Lord Zhu Huang, and said that there was a guest who didn't understand the rules, claiming to be Qin Pingon from Luopa Mountain, and broke into the patriarch's hall first as if he had begun to choose his chair. When seated, this person was still not ashamed, saying that the Lord had better come to the ancestral hall to discuss matters. After Qin Ping's loss, with a sword in one hand, he did indeed choose a chair there, and walked to the chair that belonged to the sovereign Bamboo Emperor. Because today is the celebration of the great sage who moved the mountain, the frontline peak is here. Hushan enshrines the very front seat, making an exception and placing it in the first place alongside the Bamboo Emperor. So Qin Pingon sat on this chair and looked to the door, holding a long sword stubbornly, gently picked it up and put it down, quietly waiting for the Emperor of Bamboo to show up. The female officer of Wamafeng didn't dare to go beyond the rules of the Patriarch Hall and walked into it without authorization. She could only stand at the door, and then when she saw the scene inside the Patriarch Hall, her face turned pale in a moment. This uninvited guest who looked and kindly looked at her, what's going on? Don't you want to die? Qin Pingon looked at the 2 rows of seats one by one, and they all knew who they belonged to. Although they had never been to Fengzhu Shirtang before, they were completely familiar with them. Full Moon Peak Xiaoyunhe, the Taoist god of wealth of Qiu Lingshan, Yan Zhonglu, the old sword fairy who once made swords with Li Kai, Pianyufeng female sword fairy, Qiangzifeng ancestor Leng Qi Zhiyu Fengshenwan, Li Tuanjing's reincarnated Wu Tijing Yujifeng Yulin, who was looked down upon by Master Wan, was hiding a small half of sword Xiu Lu Kai, against Xiefeng Yuan Bai. It is indeed a good place for swords and immortals. If it's just a Xingyang mountain, nothing. But if you add the Dali court Tianwan and Tianwan, there will be a white suit with great conspiracy. With Zhou Zi there will be Lu Kai. For example, just talk about Lu Kai. When Qin Pingon seemed to be most energetic, suddenly an unknown boy from Xinjiang Mountain appeared. He was born and stopped on the road. Choosing to exchange sword repair for sword repair eventually made the last hidden official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi no longer a sword repairer. For the complex situation of several worlds, this may be an extremely interesting situation, and it will be an extremely unexpected variable. But for the young mountain owner of the Luopa Mountain, it was a bleak ending that could not be imagined at all. In this matter, Zhou Xian seemed to have greeted Qin Pingon early, past the list of 10 young people in the world, and deliberately or unintentionally revealed the 2 natal flying swords of Lu Kai. Maybe this list comes from behind the scenes of Zhou Xian. One day Xianxia asked Xianxia, dignified and upright. And I also reminded you this young hidden official in advance, and let you Qin Pingon prepare for many years in advance to deal with the questioning sword that the opponent's name and natal Feijian clearly told you. Qin Pingon took a deep breath, but for the time being no need to worry. But Zhou Xian will only decide the time and place of this questioning sword. It is destined to be unavoidable and unable to escape. In fact, no matter how Qin Pingon broke his head to think about why, he still couldn't understand why Zhou Xian aimed at himself like this. Never mind. On the road of life, even if you don't know many whys, you still do what you should do. Coming. Xinjiang Mountain, the sovereign bamboo emperor. Sure enough, it was just alone. Qin Pingon smiled and did not get up. The Emperor Bamboo isolated a small world with his sword aura and stood at the door. He caught a glimpse of the ancient sword in the back of the sword peak in the other's hand for the first time. The mountain owner asked in a deep voice, Qin Pingon, what do you want to do? The man was still using the bottom of the scabbard, tapping the ground lightly and smiling. Ask for a cup of tea and then talk about business? The Emperor Bamboo grasped a white jade talisman passed down from generation to generation in his sleeve and sneered, Oh? Are you worthy? At the next moment, all the sword energy on the top of the sword peak at the front line gathered in an instant, condensed into a tall figure surrounded by clouds and mist, standing beside the sovereign bamboo emperor. The old man was still there in the green shirt and he smiled helplessly. I haven't talked about it yet, it's going to collapse? The Emperor Bamboo saw the man open his hand and the saber of the founder of Xinjiang Mountain stood still, and then the guy raised his hand, shook his sleeves and rolled out a head from it and then swiped his toes. Kicked the head of the old man Jilin towards the gate and hit the threshold. Emperor Bamboo, you don't want to think about why I can kill a 9-level martial artist on your site, but I have to run to the front line. Feng, take the initiative to say hello, did you know about this? The expression of Emperor Bamboo was uncertain. The fairyland beside him could actually shoot the sword at that young man at any time. Qin Pingon stretched out a palm, turned towards the seat of the Emperor Bamboo and said with a smile, You are here, where can I escape? Why sit down and talk? The Emperor Bamboo didn't move but asked, Is that Lu Xianyang already in the Jade Realm? Qin Pingon was too lazy to talk about this. You don't guess by yourself, you just smashed the head at the door casually, then got up and smiled. Give you a chance to have a good conversation, maybe it's not a good one, right? In a moment, even Lu Xianyang and I, all the distinguished guests who came to the frontline peak to observe the ceremony, will be on the site of the Zhuxiang. Let's enjoy the sun together. The Emperor Zhu laughed and stepped across the threshold, but the Immortal behind him stayed outside of the ancestral hall, and said as he walked, Qin Shanzhu, remember to speak carefully. If you have a conversation you will kill many people. Qin Pingon smiled and said, I've been scared to death by you. As soon as the Emperor Bamboo walked halfway, he instantly sacrificed a natal flying sword, and the Immortal at the door behind him, each with a sword, forcibly broke through an extremely strange sword formation. But the next moment, it seemed that Qin Pingon was just shaking his arms with swordsmanship and there was no more movement. However, at the top of the peak where there was no more sword energy, there appeared a beautiful landscape that looked like a landscape painting. It's like a mountain with flowers blooming successively, and then there are hundreds of spreading flying swords, dragging out a series of sword lights, flowing fireflies, spreading in all directions, the sword lights rushing to the peaks and finally hovering in one place. Around a guest. At the same time, Qin Pingon had already held the 2 ends of the ancient sword at the back of Jianfeng with both hands and smiled. Don't worry about fighting, this is the most important inheritance of your Xinjiang Mountain for 2,600 years. A token one was accidentally broken by me, who will be to blame? The Emperor Bamboo did not put away the flying sword of his life, but the young mountain owner who spoke and acted as if he had a mental illness, did another unreasonable thing. He actually threw the sword back to the emperor. then stretched out his hand again and smiled. Sit down. The Emperor Bamboo didn't even catch the Xianxia treasure of the patriarch's relic. Just let the fairy at the door do it for him. When he was seated, he was in a strange mood. In his patriarch hall, who is the host and who is the guest? Then the first sentence of that guy's mouth made the Emperor Bamboo seem to have heard a big joke. Emperor Bamboo, why don't you remove Yuan Xinye from your family's landscape genealogy first? Then I will work harder and clean the door for you by myself. Do you think it is feasible? The Emperor Bamboo was so furious that he stood up suddenly, gritted his teeth and said, Qin Pinyin, what do you think? I saw that person calm down and nodded with a smile. I think it's feasible. On the steps of Yixianfeng, Lu Xianying just put away a round of bright moon in his sleeves, shook his sleeves and returned with a full load. It was a worthwhile trip. When I look back, I can give it to Miss Yu. Mosquito legs are also meat. And in that mysterious ancient battlefield, the woman ghost asked, You are in the bright place and there is Qin Pingon in the fallen mountain hiding in the dark, right? Lu Xianying smiled and said nothing. I am not familiar with you, so there is no need to dig my heart. Suddenly, her face was distorted, full of hideous expressions, but with an indisputable look in her eyes, she said angrily, What is the point of you asking the sword so sloppily? Lu Xianying was a little confused by her question. Just like a wicked bandit before he died, he suddenly asked the heroic hero, Is it enough to kill me? Even if it is not enough, I can't kill you twice. Situ Weining seemed to be crazy and started talking crazy. Except for me, who else can you kill if you ask the sword this time? Emperor Zhu Xian Tao Yanba Yanchu, these old bastards, how many people will eventually being interrupted by the main road? Does Xingyang Mountain really hurt your muscles? Don't you know that Xingyang Mountain's gang of immortal veterans are best at what they do not say? It's like this year after year. After the death of Fenglei Garden Li Tuanjing, he produced a sect prefix, and now even the next sect is almost there. It's just that she quickly slumped. In fact, the two young sword repairers seemed to have not reached the age of 50. It was not easy to be able to ask Jian Xingyang Mountain in this way, and it was a feat. Although there are regrets, it is very happy. If the upper beam is not right, the lower beam is crooked, the patriarch, the preacher personally pass on again. Xingyang Mountain will always be Xingyang Mountain. Outsiders who know the inside story just know it. At most, it was like the ancestor Qin at Daoigu of Fengxue Temple, and his words were disgusting at Xingyang Mountain. Unfortunately, there is no Li Tuanjing in the world. This existing sword repairs the liver and intestines like snow, but hides more dirt and dirt. It has been in the mountains for 2,600 years and will always be the main conspiracy. Just like these swordsmanship, it is the real but invisible patriarch is the top spot. Moreover, when Yunfeng and Pianjifeng are so upright hills, when the patriarch's hall used to discuss matters, when did they leave the scene one by one? As Xingyang Mountain flourishes, it is destined to become more and more puppets. These true pure sword repairs, every time they have a clear conscience, they hide the extremely utilitarian plan of the patriarch hall. All sword repairs do not hesitate to do so. The handing of swords, one by one outside the mountain, seemingly impassioned to give up one's life and forget one's death, is actually the business and calculation in the patriarch hall. In the end, the ones who benefit the most are those who do not use swords. All the young and energetic young girls who used to go up the mountain may eventually become the next Tao Yanbao, Yanchu Lingqi and Niuerong. Lu Xianying looked embarrassed. It was mainly this senior female cultivator who seemed more like a life-and-death enemy of Xingyang Mountain than him, a vengeful outsider, and he was a little uncomfortable. Situ Weining began to dissipate, her soul trembling, turning into wisps of smoke, but she didn't realize it or didn't care at all and just said, Even if you really dismantle the first line of Feng Zushirtang today, you still haven't succeeded. It will even be unhelpful. In the past, Li Tuanjing had a manpower pressing Xingyang Mountain for 300 years. In fact, it was this Li Tuanjing, like a piece of the best sharpening stone, that created the sect of Xingyang Mountain today. Chunfeng Jianxiu, the same hatred. You don't know this, so you just looked at the sword fiercely as a sword fairy but not a sword fairy. Situ Weining smiled miserably, because your one Jian will only have the same result as Li Tuanjing. Have you and Qin Pingon ever thought about this problem? Lu Xianying shook his head honestly. I never wanted this. After all, my enemy is the old beast who almost beat me to death with a punch. This time I climbed the mountain, I came to chop him. As for the atmosphere of the peaks of Xingyang Mountain, it doesn't matter. If the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam is crooked, stealing chickens and dogs. male thieves and female prostitutes. It is your own business and I am not your ancestor, so I can't worry about family style. But Lu Xianying didn't say something. But don't worry, some people will definitely think that that guy kindly helped you re-edit the ancestral tree. Her heart was ashamed and she laughed loudly. Xinjiang mountain person, I must be one of them, but I haven't heard more long sword breaking and breaking. I am really unwilling. The saddest thing about Situ Weining in this life is not that Li Tuanjing likes her senior sister and doesn't like the self who met earlier, but that the Emperor Bamboo had a horrible heart and told her in private that Li Tuanjing, who had just entered the nascent soul realm, actually liked her first. The person is you, but your senior sister is the selected peak master in Uncle Xia's heart. It is more likely that she will be in the master's hall in the future. Li Tuanjing changed his mind after weighing the pros and cons. After Situ Weining realized that something was wrong and turned into a ghost, he found the Emperor Bamboo, who had successfully become the Lord of the Mountain at that time. The latter laughed and said to her that you are infatuated with Li Tuanjing, but you don't know who you like. What kind of person you are also worthy to make that Li Tuanjing like, and you still have the face to come to me Xianxia to ask the crime? Situ Weining smiled. It seems that in her life she has always been so unsatisfactory, and the people she missed have nothing to do with beauty. Suddenly spring, suddenly summer, suddenly autumn, already winter. Then there will be no more spring flowers in the coming year. She was also in love with a young girl and she was afraid of being Lang Dao. At this moment she burst into tears, but finally she had no worries and she had some dispensable joys. The small pieces could not be put together, but it was a long-lost ease. Lu Xianying wanted to ask her if she should just change to another place to practice. Just thinking about it again, Lu Xianying swallowed these words back to her stomach. She hadn't made a mistake before, she was a person. Besides, she was still a person who wanted to die. Looking back, she left the mountain this time. Regarding this questioning sword, Situ Weining hoped she would die from the beginning. Sure enough, Situ Weining said, I'm glad you are a sword fairy in the Jade Pure realm. Otherwise, if you are killed by me, one more person in the world will die in vain. I have to return to Xiaogu Mountain and continue to be that oiler. In addition, Lu Xianying noticed the strangeness of the sword top, and laughed, so this Lu Xianying suddenly said to the ghost, Situ Weining, believe it or not, my friend can help you divide Xinjiang Mountain into two. One day it will be clear and clear. Sword repair is pure sword repair, these just getting together with the bastard? And these bastards, the next days will definitely get tougher day by day. Situ Weining shook his head. If you want to believe, I can't believe it. I want to take a second look at the world outside just as I believe you did it. She turned around and smiled with Lu Xianying. Her last words in this life seemed to be what a Xinjiang Mountain pure sword repairer should say. Lu Xianying, give me a word to your friend. I hope you two young sword immortals will always be willing to respect the pure sword repairs of Xinjiang Mountain, such as Yun Feng and Pian Kaifeng. Then by the way, the gang will die every time. The Who left the Patriarch Hall. Lu Xianying clasped his fists as if joking but not like joking. Then I will tell Chen Pingon, that kid always listens to me. This guy, when he was a little boy, he was bored with a gourd and it was very overcast. You old foxes from Xinjiang Mountain just live a long time, in fact the fox is no better than him. Fortunately for his mother, I didn't pull Chen Pingon, one with a sword and one with a punch, hitting all the way from the foot of the mountain to the top of the mountain. It would be okay to beat that old beast alive, but probably there would be no chance to brag with Situ Weining. Situ Weining stopped speaking, just quietly looking at the eyes of the young sword fairy. With such clear eyes, Xinjiang Mountain is really not much. On the steps of the first-line peak, Lu Xianying suddenly sat down on the ground. And that Situ Weining hovering in the air gradually disappeared. She just returned all her sword luck, her own aura, all magic weapons and many natal things without taking away at all, so she just returned them to Xinjiang Mountain. In the eyes of outsiders, it was just a massive questioning sword. A female sword fairy with that kind of jade atmosphere was originally slightly dominant. Swordsmanship and Taoism were all extremely brilliant, but she died inexplicably. Lu Xianying stood up and then continued to ascend. As he climbed up the stairs, he cursed, "Come to a Yupu realm that hasn't died and ask me if the sword will work, please you guys." In the corridor of Xiefeng high-rise building, Jun Jinqing of Zhongyue Mountain was surprised. The young woman next to him turned into a sword light for a long journey. The speed of castration was unbelievable. He had to ask Yuan Bai, "What's the matter?" This made next to you, if you read it right, at least is it from Yupu realm or a sword fairy? You don't know? Yuan Bai was even more at a loss than Jin Qing, shook his head and said helplessly, I don't know. Then he laughed, it doesn't matter, it's okay, it will be easy for her to find the owner in the future. Jin Qing laughed and said, what a great sword fairy of Yuan dynasty, it's really not so forgiving. Yuan Bai was lying on the railing, his expression was a little tired and relieved, and his mood was a little relaxed. If you don't feel relieved, you will be suffocated to death in one breath. After that, Yuan Bai and Shanjun looked up together and saw the flower on the top of the sword, and then one of the flying swords was hovering in the corridor. Yuan Bai found that his brain was not enough today. Jin Qing had a playful look. He actually caught the flying sword of messenger without reading the content of the secret letter. He directly crushed it and said with a smile, Yuan Bai, she's gone, are you still willing to stay here? Listen to me, go to the realm sect. Let's get closer and join hands with the realm sect to take care of the old mountains and rivers. If you continue to stay on Xingyang Mountain, I will never take the initiative to choose the sword for you. Fairy embryo. There are some flying swords everywhere in the flower, which are targeted to inform some people who are watching the ceremony to leave. Some flying swords are just blindfolded. Whoever answers and opens the secret message will be at a loss. There are also some flying swords in addition to some sword immortals on the peaks of Xingyang Mountain. In addition to being unknown, there will also be yellow mud in the crotch. Whoever picks it up regrets it, and I can't wait to chop his hands in the future. Yuan Bai smiled bitterly. Is it so childish? After all, I am a named offering on the front line of the peak spectrum. I want to leave Xingyang Mountain. How can it be so simple? The old foxes of the Emperor Bamboo will not agree. Jin Qing twitched the corners of her mouth. Do you think I'm so arrogant? Not sure it will make you so reckless and down the mountain? Finally, I will say to you, except for you Guizhong, Wei Ying, Zhenjingzong, Lu Laoqing, and some people promised that the sword repairs on the old Zhuing dynasty map would never practice swords in a smoky place. Yuan Bai. Mother-in-law, you stay and regret your intestines later. Don't come to me complaining, I just think that there is no more sword repair in Aquarius Island. Yuan Bai wanted to speak but stopped. Jin Qing glanced diagonally at the top of the sword, sneered, then turned his head and patted Yuan Bai's shoulder. Dang Duan is constantly suffering from the chaos. Yuan Bai shouldn't be in this dung pit to make a living. Yuan Bai nodded. Jin Qing stretched out his hand to summon the eye-catching fairy, and took Yuan Bai to take the ferry. Later he would pass near the first-line peak. Standing at the bow of the ship, Jin Qing first glanced at the peaks of the emperor and generals, and then at the two peaks of clouds and water dragons where the gods of mountains and rivers gathered. On the cliffside pavilion on the full moon peak, a flying sword hovered like a flying bird on the branch. Wei Liang smiled and said, don't pick it up. However, Jiang Xing took Feijian, opened the secret letter and looked at it. He was dumbfounded and blank with no content. Then she turned to apologize and smiled. Wei Liang rubbed his forehead and smiled helplessly. It's okay anyway, you owe your hand. Not far away, Fu Nanhua and Jiang Yun each received a secret letter. Jiang Yun did not hesitate to open the secret letter and smiled knowingly. The letter said Feng Weidu thanked for guiding the way. Then Jiang Yun greeted Wei Liang and Jiang Xing and said he was leaving. Jiang Xing questioned, don't watch the ceremony? According to the time set by Xingyang Mountain, but it will start soon. Jiang Yun shook his head. Yufeng left Xingyang Mountain. After Fu Nanhua opened the letter, his face was gloomy and finally he gave a cold snort. The wording of the letter made Fu Nanhua frightened. You Fu Nanhua and Lao Longqing owe me 2 lives. If you are willing to pay back one today, you will stay. In the future, you originally belonged to the seat of the city lord, and you can just let Xian give you the older brother or the second sister. Wei Liang laughed in his heart. Nanhua, you can leave first, really don't be aggressive. In the future, stay away from the person who wrote the letter. The farther the better you both should not meet each other from now on. Fu Nanhua was stunned and finally, to be cautious, he fisted and left with Wei Liang. As for the Taoist couple on the mountain, his wife at home, he didn't say hello when he went down the mountain and she didn't hold back or even asked him a word. The flying sword hovered everywhere. There are sword repairs on the peaks of Xingyang Mountain, but they don't even look at them and they break the flying sword on the spot. However, more people, especially the distinguished guests on the mountain who came to observe the ceremony and congratulations, mostly found it interesting. Some mistakenly thought it was a novel trick created by Xingyang Mountain, and some just watched the excitement. Among them were the sword immortals of Zhu Feng, especially the many who had seats in Xinjiang Mountain Ancestor Master Hall. They broke the flying sword and there was another flying sword. After 1 or 2 times some people hesitated and opened it. The contents of Mison's viewing include the sword fairies of the Peak Masters, including the Peak of Piaoyun, Peak of Pina and Peak of Xianxia. Calling the old sword fairy of Yunfeng after reading the secret letter, he slapped the flying sword with a slap and said angrily, "What messy trick! Someone has done this in the Patriarch Hall." Above the secret letter it was not a bad language, but just a thoughtless sentence, saying that it was a good wish for the sword repair of Yunfeng and the success of the sword in a foreign land. The situation on Pian Kaifeng is similar. On the Qiongji Peak after the female ancestor Leng Qi read the secret letter with a lot of content, even if she pretended to be calm, her heart was already turbulent, and her heart was splitting and she did not dare to go to the ancestor hall for a time. Check it out. Beiju Luzhou, an old master who walked in the desert with cargo in the yellow sand, picked up the water bag, drank his saliva, smiled, then wait a minute and give you 200 or 300 years of sword training time is. This young hidden official has a really good mind. Besides, he was also a rare good person. For no reason I remembered the gluttonous kid who always stood far away in the small town. When the vendor selling candied haws broke through, the child no longer appeared in the man's vision. What is human nature? Every time I took a small bag of rice and went home alone after thanking me, there was an undisturbed thank you in my heart. It was a teenager who learned that the neighbor next door was about to leave his hometown. Even if the other party was still saying something harsh and unobtrusive, he would still say a simple word from the heart and be careful on the way. It was the friend Lu Xianying who was lying on the sick bed, unsure of his life or death, begging and begging with the shopkeeper Yang of the medicine shop. But it was useless and he still bowed before going out. These are extremely beautiful things. Zhou Xian didn't deny it and even approved it. The true human nature is actually a situation that anyone can have. It is a tug of war between the divinity of man and the animal nature of man. For a long time it is called cultivation, which is true both on the mountain and the mountain. But there is no way. In his opinion, the world is vast and it can accommodate many cultivators of the 14th realm. Only one 15-level sword repairer who has no one before and after no one cannot tolerate. And this matter has nothing to do with good and evil. This matter is not due to the number of days, nor is it destined, but some kind of accidental inevitability that someone constantly asks for. At least for the moment, among the few candidates, this young hermit who has successfully returned to his hometown is more and more. Get closer to the biggest one. In the future the pace may be temporarily slowed down or detour will stop, but eventually. So Zhou Xian originally planned to have someone ask Qin Pingon about the sword today. At the moment when Xinjiang Mountain was defiant, it was like being knocked down to the dust by Qin Pingon and Lu Xianying jointly from the top of a mountain. As long as Qin Pingon learns a little later, the same will happen. But now that Qin Pingon was aware of this, he must have a lot of plans in accordance with his consistent behavior style, such as the Tianwan, Jiang Shangzhen, and even Lu Jinglong would twist out a few 3-mountain talisman. Then through that natal flying sword, together with Qin Pingan's caged bird, the Dali court stayed in Dadu, an imitation Baiyujing dedicated to the great monk on the top of the mountain. The mantis catches the cicada, the oriole is behind and the slingshot is down. Xinjiang Mountain, Qin Pingon, Jianshu Lukai, Zhou Xian. Except for a Xinjiang Mountain, all the players in the game are actually in a mysterious situation that is bait to each other. It only depends on who has calculated further and more comprehensive plans. Qin Pingon was the biggest person to observe the ceremony at Xinjiang Mountain, and when he was seated in the first-line Peak Ancestor Hall, he would turn away from the guest. When Lu Xianying came to demolish the Patriarch's Hall today, Qin Pingon was responsible for the soldering Xinjiang Mountain from top to bottom, from inside to outside. Therefore Lu Xianying just ascended the heights alone and asked the sword in a cool manner, because there was Qin Pingon who was in charge of the sword with Xinjiang Mountain. There are still only 2 people seated in the hall of the first-line Fingzhu Master. It just so happened that it happened to be the Mountain Master and the Mountain Master, the Suzerain and the Suzerain, and the Yupu realm versus the Yupu realm. The green shirt was wearing tea and he smiled for no reason and said, "It collapsed." The Emperor Bamboo frowned slightly. Is this guy still pretending to be a ghost? But it's okay, Lu Xianying the climber will soon be unable to catch the next sword. Look again at that time if you Qin Pingan has the leisurely feeling of drinking tea. A small state city on the edge of the Xinjiang Mountain boundary, Relying on the magic of the fairy family, the local people as well as the uninfluenced genealogical masters and Xianxia can all be here. One of Yunfeng's treasures of the mountain, pull the cloud mirror and watch the celebration from a distance. There are 3 places like Yuanzhou Jisuo, one in each of the southeast and northwest which just surround Xinjiang Mountain. Both the north and the south have mobilized several elite frontier troops to coordinate with the Xinjiang Mountain monks to take charge of local security. But in the final analysis, it's just a way of doing things. Not only is Xinjiang Mountain's sword repairing like clouds and the status of the sect in the sky, the more fundamental reason is that the cultivators on the Aquarius continent have long been accustomed to the installation of the Dali cavalry. That strict rule is a little offense and there has never been a fish that slipped through the net. Not only did the genealogical master suffer the crime, but also the patriarch Hall. Yamazawa Yeshia was hunted down and imprisoned and even killed on the spot. The ban has been gradually lifted and because of inertia, it still appears to be extremely safe and self-conscious. Just say one thing, no matter where the sword repairs come from within the territory of a continent for many years, there has been almost no one who will rampage and wanton swordsmanship in the streets of the market. Sword repair is still true, let alone other monks. It's just that today's celebration before it even started made people dizzy. Anyway, few can see the reason and depth. Anyway, it's just looking at the excitement. It's just that Xinjiang Mountain swordsman is cruising in the city, but no one dared to applaud. After all, the stranger who asked the sword won one after another. Those immortal masters of Xinjiang Mountain looked very ugly. Donggu, Su Xiaoqiao, Xieling, the 3 masters of the Longquan sword sect, were looking at the beautiful flowers in a restaurant. Donggu looked solemn. Master meant that no matter what junior brother Lu is making today, even if Wenjian loses, we will eventually take away senior brother Lu, and within Wenjian as long as it's fighting against each other we don't have to worry about the outcome. Junior brother Lu died on the mountain regardless of him. But apart from Wenjian, we must not let the monk of Xinjiang Mountain rely on the large number of people to forcefully leave junior brother Lu. To put it simply, Lu Xianying asked about his sword. After the question of the sword, Longquan sword sect would take Lu Xianying away. In short, Xinjiang Mountain would not want to keep Lu Xianying. Donggu handed Su Xiaoqiao and Xieling a sword talisman of unknown origin, which could shrink the land and the mountains and rivers, and in a short time, go to the foot of the first-line peak. Having said this, Donggu looked at the 2 juniors and said, "We can almost rush over." Su Xiaoqiao nodded silently. Xieling smiled and said, "If they dare to leave junior brother Lu, they have to add me to ask the sword. As long as we get along for a long time, no one seems to dislike Lu Xianying. This guy has nothing to do with the world, regardless of his fame, can play a joke and smiles happily when he sees anyone. The heart is as high and arrogant as Xieling, and he also sincerely recognizes his brotherhood with Lu Xianying, and even deep in his heart Xieling feels that Lu Xianying will be the big brother or take over the position of the master in the future. Far from being as diligent as the senior brother Donggu. As for Xieling himself, it is enough to cultivate Taoism with peace of mind. To the north of Xinjiang Mountain, there is a small county town, where there is no mirror flower and water moon set up by Xinjiang Mountain. However, a group of monks on the mountain deliberately did not get close to Xinjiang Mountain. They just drank here. They just ran into a little excitement. A group of stunned people from the outsiders, not too much to cross the river, dared to grab the site with the local snake, and the result was given. After making dumplings, dozens of powerful people in the rivers and lakes of Kongwu surrounded the wine shop, and then walked out a middle-aged scribe who fluttered in white, holding a folding fan, ignoring the atmosphere of tension between the 2 sides. After all, there is a huge gap in strength. I was already guilty. The white-robed scribe smiled and gently pushed away a foreign countryman's hatchet with a folded fan, and sat down alone. As a result, a silly boy who couldn't see the situation put a hatchet around his neck. The white scribe was still full. With a smile on his face, he asked the tall young man sitting across the table if he knew who he was. The latter nodded, and the white-robed scribe lifted the folding fan without turning his head, and knocked on the hatchet on his shoulder. The young man asked with a smile, "Now that he knows, what then?" After saying this, the scribe suddenly picked up the wine bowl and splashed the other party's face severely. Not waiting for the tall young man to swallow his anger and bow his head to admit his mistake, the young man holding the hatchet directly chopped the white-clothed scribe to droop his head. Both sides of the confrontation looked at each other. Among the monks on the Table Mountain sitting in the corner, There was a beautiful woman. She probably didn't expect such a result. She couldn't help laughing, but she just stopped smiling immediately. There are 4 people here. From Jingwu Mountain. Ma Kuxuan, according to his seniority, he has to call the uncle's spare time. Ma Kuxuan's pioneer disciple, a young man who is both a military cultivator and a pure martial artist, is named Wang Zhu and a maidservant. Ma Kuxuan stepped on the bench with a smile on his face and then used the fixation technique on the stalker and then smiled with the young stunners. What a daze, kill someone. Don't you hurry up? The teenagers fled suddenly. Ma Kuxuan looked at the young man who had not forgotten to take the hatchet in his hand and wiped the blood on someone else while running, and smiled in his heart. If your eldest brother turns around and scolds you for trouble, you won't be angry and you have the courage. When you come back here, I will accept you as an apprentice and then I will go up the mountain as a god. Ma Kuxuan looked towards Xingyang Mountain, twisted a salted peanut and threw it into his mouth. The biggest problem is the attitude of that Chao Xuanshou. The minister of the Ministry of Rights must look at this person's look. If Chao Ping chooses to lean towards Xingyang Mountain, it will be fun. Wang Zhu, you who will ask boxing in the future are now on Xingyang Mountain. But you don't necessarily need to ask boxing. Ma Kuxuan took a sip of wine and glanced at Yu Shiwu. Yu Shiwu smiled and explained to the young boy, if nothing goes wrong, this mountaineer in questioning the sword, Qin Pingon, would be destined not to shoot at the beginning. With Lu Xianying's realm and the strange magical powers of that fate-flying sword, he left. To the top of the sword there was no problem. In a big deal, I was surrounded by a few Xingyang Mountain patriarchs and sword immortals. But if you want to tear down the patriarch's hall, you have to rely on Qin Pingon, who did not accompany Lu Xianying to ask the sword together. Because the real questioning sword often doesn't have to deal with someone to dismantle people's hearts. In fact, it is the best swordsmanship. Ma Kuxuan laughed and said, sword immortals of Xingyang Mountain, scare me to death. Yu Shiwa's expression changed slightly, sighed, opened his palms, pinched with one hand and finally put his hands together, holding a bowl in one hand, twisting a peanut in one hand, chewing lightly and saying in his heart, we can go. Ma Kuxuan's face was gloomy. Yu Shiwu, what did you say before coming here? This is the only opportunity one missed. So you let me go? Yu Shiwu nodded. Yes, you can go. Ma Kuxuan stared at the calm-looking guy and after a while he asked, is it the only chance? I missed it this time? Yu Shiwu still nodded. At least in my opinion it seems like this. Ma Kuxuan, a guy who traveled several continents with his domineering and arrogant reputation, rarely showed a tired look. He came down the mountain this time just to change his life with Qin Pingon. Because according to Yu Shiwa's previous statement, Qin Pingon is very likely to lose his status as a sword repairer. I never thought I was coming, but I actually said to leave. It's just that Ma Kuxuan's eyes sharpened quickly and he smiled and drank the drink in the bowl. There was a reason for the matter and it may not necessarily result. Fortunately, there should be nothing set in the world. Ma Kuxuan was not a person who likes to be horny, and became lazy and casual again. When the hatchet boy returns, I will finally have a less wasteful direct disciple. A secluded hill in the south of Xingyang Mountain, deep in the old forest. 2 women are standing on the top of the mountain. One was Ningyao, who didn't really return to Luopa Mountain, and the other was Credit Moon, who came quietly from Luopa Mountain. Yesterday, on the bright moon night, the round-faced girl took a few casual glances and saw the Ningyao who was sitting alone on the top of the mountain. She hesitated for a long time and still planned to see her. A buddy of a friend's friend is his friend. Alas, Ningyao of the Great Wall of Sword Chi Credit You has long admired it. Only when she appeared from the moonlight, she regretted it. Because at that time Ningyao opened his eyes, her sword box behind her, even if there was no long sword out of the sheath, just the sword intent, if there was nothing, made Xiaoyu just feel that she would die when she appeared. However, Ningyao quickly reduced his sword spirit, smiled and stood up and said, sorry, forgot to be you. Xiaoyu showed up immediately and was a little happy. Ningyao said he forgot, indicating that Ningyao had heard of himself before. However, after the two sat there was nothing to talk about, just each in a daze. An old duck thinking about Lu Xianying's dried bamboo shoots is delicious, but he can't eat it anymore. After all, the ancestor of Xingyang Mountain who moved to the mountain heard Lu Xianying said that he seems to be broken again, and that's someone who should not be underestimated. Ascension. In fact, Ningyao didn't pay much attention to warming up his sword intent, thinking about the previous conversation with that guy. You said Lu Ji actually likes Oolong? Nothing. He didn't believe it. He explained, If Lu Ji likes Aoyang won't say that about her and will only run away. He nodded. It sounded like that. She turned her head. It seems to be saying you really understand. At that time the man was helpless and began to play stupid again. At this moment, Xiaoyu racked his brains, finally found a topic and said softly, "At the riverside shop earlier, Lu Xianying practiced swords several times. They were all dangerous. They needed me to protect the way. When I woke up, Lu Xianying's face was blood-stained and his injury was not light, so his jade pure realm was actually not easy to come." Ning Yao said, "Because Lu Xianying feels that he needs to take care of Chen Pingon. Credit you will be suspicious," glanced at Ning Yao cautiously and whispered, "Sir Hidden Officer, where does someone need to take care of him?" Ning Yao smiled and said, "Under the world, Lu Xianying would actually think so and Chen Pingon would also think so. Anyway, the two of them think this is a natural matter and there is no need to say anything. You are a small town that arrived late, so don't know this." He said, "You are Ning Yao, so what you say is what you say." Ning Yao suddenly turned his head and joked, "Do you have to call your sister-in-law in the future?" Xiu smiled awkwardly, held back for a long time and asked, "Then I call your younger brother and sister?" Ning Yao was speechless. The round-faced girl suddenly felt that she was really clever in a mess. Ning Yao stood up, turned his head to look at the signs of Wenjian near the first-line peak and asked, "Credit the month, don't you worry about Lu Xianying's safety?" He still sat, shook his head and said, "Don't worry," he said, "he will run away if he can't beat him. Whoever chases him will eat ass." Ning Yao smiled and said, "You are still a little worried." Xiaoyu was stunned, then saw the woman who had ascended to the realm and gently rolled her head to the north. Hiyue immediately understood. It turned out that you were worried about that dark-hearted young hidden official. So they went to Yufeng North together. Ning Yao said that they only need to settle down at Bailudu. Xiaoyu nodded vigorously and said empathetically, "Men, they all want face and they don't want women to mix it up." Ning Yao said, "For no reason, some people are shameless." Inoue whispered, "You can just scold Chen Pingon, scold Lu Xianying for what you are doing." Ning Yao said in a huff, "I didn't scold Lu Xianying." Credit month. Haha laughed a few times. Turning his head and peeking at Ning Yao, the woman next to him at this moment is very damn. A ferry in Househan that was close to Zhu Mountain but did not dock, did not receive a letter from Jianding Feijian. However, Chao Jun opened a secret letter as agreed, and the content of the letter made Chao Jun laugh, which was excellent. "Senior brother asked me to give you a message. You are willing to go to the Great Wall of Jianqi. Before disembarking, throw a few swords at Qiang Zifeng," meaning. Chao Jun felt that he had to pay back the gift, so he left the ferry alone. The patrolman was younger and he didn't need to say hello. He just said hello to Lu Xuanmei. "See you later." The battlefield in the south. After Chao Jun left the ferry, he went to Qiang Zifeng and registered his own number. "Master, my surname is Chao Mingjun and my ancestral home is Nipping Lane, Huaihuang County, and I am a hometown of Lu Xianying." Then he faced Qiang Zifeng with 3 swords. A Yuaning sword fairy again? After asking the sword and finishing the work, Chao Jun traveled far away with his sword, and traveled directly across the sea to the site of the Great Wall of Jianqi. On the Qiongji Peak where it rained all night, all the guests yelled at the guy who claimed to be Chao Jun, and the sisters on the mountain were even more trembling. But the person who worries the most is that Ling Qi, because the secret letter received by the Qiang Zifeng female sword fairy contains a lot of content. Who is Qiang Zifeng, what activities he did in a certain place in certain years. Everything was fine and precise. In addition, there is another sentence in the letter. "If I were Jiang Shangzhen from Luzhou in Beiju, I could help Qiong Jifeng write 7 or 8 novels." And the last few words on Misins are especially dazzling. "You didn't look down on Ni Yuerong Yunlu, you just envied her for her youthful appearance. When you were young, you had the ability to climb Xia Yuanqui's bed at Full Moon Peak. Now that you have a high level, you can't climb it. Isn't it very awkward? Qiang Zifeng is a female cultivator. Within 300 years, you have given 16 people to the immortal masters and dignitaries on the mountain. Is Qiang Zifeng a brothel? Are you an old bastard? Then why did you get some money?" When a Zhongyue Shanzhen's ferry passed by the Full Moon Peak, Yuan Bai and Jin Qing were standing on the bow of the ship. Yuan Bai saw the end of the woman's ghost. He sighed and said, "It's in the face of Shanjun. Didn't let me pick up the sword." Jin Qing sneered and said, "Unfortunately, I didn't save face when I went out this time." Not only did Jin Qing take Yuan Bai to leave, he also secretly sent a letter to several Dali vassals in the middle, or the monarchs of the old Zhuang dynasty vassals, reminding them to be careful of being caught by the fish. Yuan Bailang said, "To Xiefeng Yuan Bai will start immediately, it is not Zhengyangshan sword repair." Zhou Xian, the prince of the great Sui dynasty, neither received a secret letter from Jianding. He didn't know in advance that there would be this questioning sword, but just like Shanjun Jinqing, he took the ferry and left Pianju Peak. Moreover, the deputy head of the Lin Lu Academy suddenly appeared, smiled and said to drop in and give him a ride. The three progeny Lu Jimao, including Tian Hujuan, left the hill where they were at the same time, but they walked relatively less blatantly. The of Nanue picking up the mountain of Xishan received a letter from Feijian saying that after going down the mountain he helped transfer this thing to Fan Shanjun. It is a jade plate with the 4 characters Jun Kinjiuxiang in seal. At the end of the letter, let the mountain god who is on the mountain of the prince do not have to rush to agree to this matter, but why he came, why not think about this first? Lu Laoqing smiled and asked, "Old gang leader, how about it, is it lively?" Gao Mian laughed heartily and stood up and said, "Then run farther, our brothers will continue to watch the fun." Wei Liang got up and left Yufeng. "Anyway, I am not well known. This time I followed Yunlin Jiang clan to eat and drink. Now that I have roughly seen the method, I can go down the mountain. Anyway, I don't have much more for this viewing ceremony and I am a lot less." As for Li Fuyu, it was the last time that Luopa Mountain was among the first immortal family of the Zhongzi, one of the 5 famous guests Qing, and the remaining 4 were enshrined by the Dragon Elephant Sword sect of Nanpu Suozhou Mrs. Yan Yan. Beiju Luzhou Fulu Monk Huan Yun. Ai Aizhou Woman Sword Fairy Xiesong Hua. Yuan Ingjian repaired at the Jinwu Palace in Luzhou Beiju Lu Jiqing. What's more, there are 2 unnamed guest Qings who even moved Li Fuyu, referring to Xianfeng Yuan Lingdian. Fengshua Temple Great Sword Fairy Wei Jin. Therefore, Li Fuyu didn't get the letter from Feijian, so he turned the rainbow and left without concealing his long-distance figure. Qi Zhen and the Divine Master asked with a smile what to say. Gao Jinfu looked relieved, smiled and went back to the mountain to practice. The disciple was really too lazy to take a look at the strategizing of the hidden official, and was disheartened. Qi Zhen smiled and nodded. This is also considered a practice. When the relationship between men and women is hurt, the anger in the heart will burn all the good memories into ashes, but afterwards all the flames of jealousy will be revived. If you can see everything, it is the first step to truly untie the knot of love. Gao Jinfu finally asked, "Master, do you leave quietly or?" Qi Zhen smiled and said, "Let's go back and make some drinks with some old friends of Zhenwu Mountain and Fengshua Temple." In the final analysis, Qi Zhen hopes that his god sect will be able to deal with sects like Longquan Jinzong and Luopashen in the future. The vast mountains and rivers of Tongya Island were destroyed in an instant, but Aquarius Island was blocking the advancement of the wild world, which made Qi Zhen really understand a truth. In fact, it is only 2 words: human heart. On the side of the Su family in Qingfeng City, Su Hun read a secret letter, and then the upper 5-level cultivator clenched the letter tightly, crushed it instantly. His face was blue, staring at his wife. "Don't use your brain, wait for it to rust." Lu Xianying said back then he was willing to sell an ancestral wart armor, but to whom it was not given. Although it was still forced to buy and sell, it did not matter. After all, you took the initiative to return a fox country. Remember to thank Mrs. Su and me. Her senior brother Chai Bofu used to build a bridge and worked hard to help make the sale and complete it. With a change of future, it is difficult to guard against house thief and cannot be ignored. At the end of the letter, the young mountain owner of Luopeishan told Su Hun bluntly that if he was willing to stay and help the in-laws of Zhengyangshan, that would be the best. Lu Xianying and him were waiting for the Su family in Qingfeng City at the Patriarch Hall. After Chao Jun left on the ferry where the patrol envoy Chao Ping was, there was still a sword fairy who came here by himself, staying on the boat. Fengshua Temple of the Wei and Jin dynasties with Chao Ping, Guan Yiran and Lu Xuanmei are in a room at this moment. Before Wei Jin came to take his place in the house, Guan Yiran had deliberately left the courtier postman with Lu Xuanmei and negotiated a deal with the patrol envoy alone, or Guan Yiran handed out a long-prepared one. Letter, true secret letter. Chao Ping did not agree or refuse. He just asked Lu Xuanmei to invite Wei Jin to come over and asked a question. "That young mountain lord, are you credible?" Wei Jin nodded and said, "When you get off the wine table you can be trusted." Chao Ping smiled. "Understood. Xuanmei, you go to inform the servant, and say that I have left beforehand and let him stay and continue to watch the ceremony. Between the peaks of Xingyang Mountain, monks keep going away and ferry boats keep going away. Inside the ancestral hall of the first line of peaks, Qin Pingon was still drinking tea. After learning a piece of news, the Lord Zhu Huang also began to drink tea, because no matter what accidents outside the mountain, it seems that when added together the news is not as good as the news. Accident. Therefore the Emperor Bamboo seriously began to consider the other party's statement. Zheng Yangshan took the initiative to remove Yuan Zini's genealogical name, and then let this person kill the former mountain protector. Really need it? Is there no room for maneuver? Or is it to say that killing the heart together simply goes slant regardless of slaughtering this sinister, disgusting young man? Qin Pingon suddenly put down his teacup, got up and walked to the gate and said with a smile, I have to meet the ancestor who moved the mountain.